other ships specifically. But I would be happy to see like or CCP Rise and Psych would solve it.
Eve FanFest 2022. Can we expect a keynote, a big keynote?
So Berger is already writing the keynote, like, and he's been writing it in his head for at least 6 months before he knew that we were going to have a fan fest. So like he is just antsy at the moment. There's going to be a keynote. There's going to be like I don't know what is actually going to happen because I'm not the runner of that. CCP Goodfella is, and but I hope it's the best we can do with COVID. Like that's like I'm as optimistic as I can be, but I can't wait to be there and talk about.
Team likely to do a panel or a presentation at FanFest?
I would assume so. Like I think all doors are open for that. Just again based on how many people can be in a room together and all that like COVID stuff. I honestly like I hope so, and but there's nothing stopping us from doing so if it's possible.
Yeah, we were already talking about the really cool FanFest ideas. I want to chime in like for questions like, is there going to be a new ship, or what is some new roles for some old ships, or things like that. That's a great topic for this little get together called FanFest in the beginning of May. You guys should definitely, if you can come, Iceland's a beautiful place. But if you can only watch online, that's cool too. We'd love to have you. The whole thing will be like on our Twitch channel and then pre-recorded on YouTube. But I was talking with CCP Paragon and CCP Goodfella and CCP Convict about cool ideas for FanFest, and let's just say like there's already a very nice list drawn up of great things. It includes player presentations, the Invasion World Tour Finals, which meant to happen at the previous FanFest, will be happening live. All the players have committed to doing that, so that's kind of an announcement here for the first time. So you'll be able to see those players PvP in their 2v2 format live, which I think is going to be kind of cool. Builds off of a little bit of fun that we had with the Alliance Tournament. Alliance Tournament 17 also coming back next year. Huge shout out to CCP Aurora and the rest of the team who made that a reality. But yeah, lots of
I'm
lots
just
of fun
sad that I
stuff.
can't. I'll probably do an ecosystem like economy presentation because I didn't like I forgot to share my Miro board today, so I'll have to save it for January or a FanFest.
Okay, and we're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a plan for what we're going to do next, which is I think we're going to raid over to the Talking and Stations.
Yeah, Talking and Stations raid.
Is the producer okay with that? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. He doesn't normally speak, but he did. Maybe only I heard it. Thank you very much, guys. Okay. First, I want to say thank you to CCP Rattati, CCP Paragon, and CCP Swift for coming out, facing a tough crowd today, and answering a bunch of questions for us. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in to listen. I apologize we couldn't get to all of your questions in an hour. Hopefully you can join us over in Talking and Stations and ask some more questions there with the team there.
And I'll also say for CCP Paragon and myself, we'll be going through like the forum threads and stuff. And if you have questions that are like really pressing, we'll do our best to answer them as well, so you guys do get an answer to your questions. I'm sorry, every time on any talk show about Eve, I tend to go on forever and ever, kind of like I'm doing now. So I ate up a lot of time, but we'll make sure you guys get answers to your questions. There's no bad questions. And thank you very much, Carneros, for being our today and coming up with some crackers for us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Join us. And if you're collecting loyalty points like a lot of people are, staying with us for the streams raid earns you a few loyalty points. Don't be shy redeeming them down below to get your skins.
Oh. All right, welcome to Talking in Stations. We're going to get started. We're going to get started here in just a second. Let me make some adjustments. All right, people will be joining this channel. Some of you are going to be watching from out there, if I can do that, out there. And some of you are going to be in here with us. If you want to talk, this is the place to do it. This is Talking in Stations. All right. Again, we're just going to give CCP a chance to raid over. I'm not exactly sure when that happens. Oh, I think it already did. Is my mic roboting?
Completely.
On Discord only? All right. Well, Caleb, why don't you take it over? I'm going to restart and let's get some other people in here real quick. Omeka, Fonsui.
Well, it pretty much went as expected, right? It was fairly relaxed and mellow, and chat was exploding with a lot of rage and a lot of moderation, but also some positive responses and some fairly good comments and intelligent questions. Of course, they didn't all get addressed, but I think it went okay. But still, I would classify this as a vague posting stream. They just kind of said what was expected, and of course they brought some graphs that on concept was decent, but it looked like there was also broken data in there, as we've discussed many times with the MER as well. I don't know. Overall, it's fine, but I was definitely not at the seat of my pants or anything like that.
Omeka.
Yeah, I think there are some positives and there are some neutrals. The positives are at least Rotati emphasized that they want to focus on new content right now this year rather than rebalances only. And I think that's a good thing. Like even when you can even rebalance the ecosystem with new stuff rather than nerfing, right? So, and they wanted to touch on the anomalies, existing anomalies, and make them interesting. I think that's a good thing, especially from a game design perspective. Nullsec anomalies are one of the paths of least resistance in EVE. That means there has been traditionally decent and scalable money in them. By scalable, I mean if you have a large alliance in a region, you can still keep, all your members can keep doing it without reducing the price of whatever you are farming. For example, if you put a very big alliance into faction warfare, then they're gonna tank the price of LP. But that's not the case with anomalies. So it's the path of least resistance. So nullsec organizations kind of pushed their members traditionally into anomaly farming, and then anomaly farming is boring. So I mean, I'm not going to say boring. Maybe it's fun for some people, but let me take it that back. But it's less interactive.
It's obsolete.
And interesting.
It's the older content.
So what happens then is a lot of these, many of them are new players. They join these alliances, which is good because players will socialize, remain in the game further. But then they are pushed into anomalies and for their income generation, and that kind of bores people. And it at least did it for me for the first time I tried EVE. And then, but if the anomalies were more fun or more engaging, more interesting, then maybe this wouldn't be the case. So making the path of least resistance a fun activity, or the core gameplay loop a fun activity, is always good in a game design perspective. So I think these are positive things, and generally, but in general, yeah, it went as it didn't go as as negative as I would have thought. So that's a good thing at least.
Well, there was also a lot of response in chat. I don't know if you noticed this, but there seems to be a fear of if CCP rolls out something like dynamic distribution and dynamic bounty stuff and all of these dynamic systems, that it ends up making EVE Online like an RNG whack-a-mole, right? Where you can't really effectively plan anything. And even though we did need some volatility in the system, complete randomness and chaos is really not healthy, regardless of what Hilma thinks.
All right.
I want to jump on what Olmeca said, because it was actually really close to like the crux of the issue, which is like, so faction warfare. The reason why faction warfare isn't pushed by alliances isn't because it's easier or harder. It's because the alliance gets zero income from faction warfare. This has been one of the core problems of faction warfare since the very beginning, because of the fact that the primary income gainer from faction warfare is LP. It makes it so that the top level income of faction warfare is non-existent, and yet those organizations are still expected to give SRP, are still expected to provide hauling and all these kinds of things, and that makes it so that organizations tend to want to go to nullsec, not because it's better content, not because it's better, their players want to, but because that taxes allows them as leaders to be able to solve their own problems easier. And so another good example of this is what is it? The Abyss, right? Regardless of how great or bad the Abyss is, alliances will never prioritize the Abyss, because if all of their people switched from ratting to Abyss running, they would lose their ADMs. Alliances are actually disincentivized from encouraging the better activities, or the activities that are more recent and therefore have more sophisticated design than the old standards.
To add on to that, there are a ton of areas where this is problematic as well. Places that you might go like NPC nullsec. Most of the income is going to be built off of LP, which you can't tax, so you have to do a manual program. That's a ton of labor. Or it's going to be based off of moons, which moon ore refining taxes might be helped with the coming of compression, but by and large, moon refining taxes are a mess right now as well. So trying to set up your income off of that is also incredibly inconvenient.
But this is back to the whole problem of top tier income levels, right? And pathways to income, and the fact that we always talk about this in the micro and not on the macro, or on the scale where it belongs, right? Because this is really about services and cost, right? We act as if, well, we're always supposed to do this SRP. Well, maybe these contracts should have cost. Maybe it should be a reduced cost, but free ships maybe actually doesn't really make sense from an organizational level. And the same with free services and slots and office rentals and all that stuff on the infrastructure. If you do not add cost to your organization, and there's not enough actual ISK transfers, right? So you can tax them, then you will not have an income pathway. And this is what needs to be discussed. This is why I keep talking about things like adding proper cost utilities and upkeep and slot limitations and all these things, because then people will start valuing things and it will become normal for them to pay for services. This is like usage payments. The fact that we've got things like tokens that can be handed into NPC stations, and then there is no way to tax that ISK transfer, right? Because it happens somewhere else. These things need to be in-housed in a way that makes it a whole new system of how you get income as an organization, whether that's corporation or alliance.
All
I'm
right,
going to give a good example here.
hold on, guys. Hold on. I know I'm
Sure.
I think I'm okay on stream. If I'm not, let me know if my voice is roboting. I may be roboting in this channel, but I wanted to get Teddy
in
in
Discord.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
But when I
Let me
listened to you
let
on
me
stream and you were fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, because it's a different channel. But let me get Teddy involved here, who is a Wormholer guy, ran for CSM. And what was your reaction to the Q&A? Did it assuage some of your misgivings, if you had any to begin with? Or is this a good patch for Wormholers?
I'd be terrified.
No, it was kind of, I mean, most of it was par for the course for a CCP stream.
where it's a lot of speaking with no real answers.
What were you looking
for them
for?
to then
What kinds of things were you looking for?
any sort of indication that they might address the problems that we have at the moment, like the mass roaching fleets. For them to then just say, we know that blue loot's an issue, sets off so many red flags that all they're just going to do is just nerf blue loot into the ground. And that's just going to have so much unintended consequence that I don't even think they probably know all of it.
So you're afraid they're going to nerf your income without fixing any of your problems. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but I think a lot of the income of wormholers is sort of blown over, like really talked up to the point where it's a very small majority making that money, and to then do a mass sort of nerf of blue loot across the board presents like such a negative to some of the smaller corps.
And
I would be very nervous if I was a wormholer right now, because they didn't say anything positive about like, oh, wormholers need new content or anything like that. They just lumped it in with incursions and other things that are considered to be out of control ISK making. So
yeah, especially if you
no
bear in
offer
mind,
and just a threat.
the last content update we had was Citadel patch.
Yeah, this does not smell good at all.
And it's important to couple that with another related topic. If you've seen, and I posted it in public voice text, if you've seen the graphs that CCP have shared, one of them is volume of ore mined by ship type, and Rorqual is used to mine like more than all the other ships combined in the game. And
That
then
graph is so funny.
And then when I look at the graph and I see where we are today, and I know that one of the big goals of CCP with scarcity and everything was reducing the amount of ore being mined compared to, or the gap between ore being mined and ore being destroyed. So there's a healthier ecosystem. And I look at this graph and I see, you've done all this scarcity stuff and you touched the compositions and you touched rocks and everything. If only you just made Rorquals very, very hard to multibox, or maybe if only you just nerfed Rorquals, just nerfing Rorquals alone, you would probably have achieved the same goal, because all that value of mining in nullsec, it was generated by, I think, and that was my personal experience when I roamed in nullsec in 2019. All that value was mostly a minority multiboxing more than 4 or 5 Rorquals. Similarly, in wormholes, right now I multibox 8 more others, and I make a lot of money. And there are a bunch of people like myself, but it's not the case that, you know, if you want to reduce the amount of value or ISK generated by this, you target people like myself rather than just broadly targeting everyone in wormhole space.
Yeah, so these sites haven't been touched since Citadel. They were designed for a DPS number that is no longer there, and for tank numbers that are no longer there. After like the Marauder patch, it's just the numbers are just disgusting, and the speed that you can run these sites now, to the point where there's not really that much point having a dread if you can multi-box a lot of characters.
All right. We're going to...
When CCP does these things, a good approach, if Ratati is watching, a good approach is just targeting the top 1% or 10% rather than targeting the entire community that's generating that value.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to show a commercial while I restart my account here, and hopefully I can get rid of the technical problem I'm having with Discord. This commercial is something very exciting that's happening in the new year from Talking in Stations and from Signal Cartel. So check this out. We'll be right back after this. One end stage for everyone. So I guess we're not going for a break, but I am going to play this video for you guys. Hang tight. Here you go.
Welcome to New Eden, traveler. I'm Katya Say, and I'll be your guide on this journey of exploration. Over the course of my near decade of travel around the cluster, I saw things that I had only dreamed about as a child. Sights that left me in awe of the beauty and majesty that is New Eden, and the crushing devastation that humanity could bestow upon themselves and others. There were many who inspired me along my journey, but only one I aspired to be like, Mark 726 of Eve Travel. His holoblog was a terrific guide to every new region I encountered, and I hope to bring it to life for you in this series. Join us as we explore and share with you some of the most fascinating sights the cluster has to offer, from humanity's humble beginnings to whispers of tales shrouded in mystery that have become near legend. I hope you'll join us in this endeavor to explore our universe together. Somewhere, something wonderful is waiting to be found.
All right, we will check that out. You guys can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back.
Did anybody
now.
else appreciate the low-key shade of the Katia putting the Children of Light video alongside a project working with Mark 726? Because chef kiss.
That's a very inside game, but yeah. Check with Ashtarothi on what that inside joke is later on. Going back to the Q&A. We were talking, I think last we were talking about. So, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, well, we were showing off the graph of the mining changes, and while that graph is very enlightening, and I really like the fact that they showed it, because it really does clearly show the fact that Rorqual mining was out of control. Like, it's one thing for them to say it, but that graph clearly demonstrates why they did what they did. That said, it was the only graph. I really feel like they missed their opportunity to, and it also seemed like they were a little bit unprepared to even show that graph. I was really surprised that they weren't quite as prepared to justify themselves as much, whatever. They kind of talked more nebulously about the future, and I was expecting more of a doubling down on the past.
What did you guys, sorry about the dead air, everything's taking a little longer than usual. What did you guys think about that graph?
But it's not value, it's volume.
But if you assume that they Rorqual's mined more valuable ore compared to other ships, then it means they even had a bigger share than this with respect to value.
Exactly. It's actually, the problem was bigger than this when it comes to actual value generation, because it is true that Rorquals generally mine on average more expensive ore, so it would be a lot bigger. You're completely correct, Olmeka.
How many years ago was the beginning of this graph? The furthest left point of this graph is what year?
It looks 2019. December 2019.
Okay, we assume the hump didn't just run up to that peak, that it was probably pretty high before that, maybe for a year. How long was it that Rorquals were mining twice as much as everything else combined?
As late as March of last year, according to that graph, right?
Yeah, you got re-reposted.
No, it's 2018. Sorry, not 19. It's 2018. It starts with December 2018, and then you look at it, and then March 2019, Rorquals really significantly get nerfed. But I see that now. And then between June and September 2019, which is the blackout, Rorquals mine much less. Before the blackout, they mine huge quantities, and after the blackout, they don't go back to the old numbers, but still mine a lot. And then after after the nerf to the rocks, basically, or composition of rocks, they probably look like they completely stopped or mostly stopped mining.
Quick side note, if you didn't see Sunday's show, Dunk Dinkle was invited on. We got into a discussion about Rorquals being nerfed overnight, and I said, no, it's been more like 3 years. He said, no, it's been overnight, but you can see that Rorquals here were nerfed 3 years ago and continuously up until now. So I just wanted to make that side point there, Dunk. When you get a chance, I'll let you on. You can counter that. All right. That was just a side note. You guys, or you want to discuss more on the Rorquals? That seems like an astounding. That problem was bigger.
I mean,
than
I have
thought.
a different approach, maybe.
All right, go ahead, Prospector. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, greetings, Asherati. I'm just asking myself what's happening with that guys who are having a lot of ISK to invest for the Rorquals. And what is the meaning maybe behind it? Maybe if you take a look on the other side and from a different perspective, the reason maybe what could happen is that they try to bound some assets and ISK generation because maybe bigger alliance who has the money is going to get into it and try to pull as much effort out of it, and now they have a lot of Rorquals hanging around there. Sorry to be that bad boy here, but or the bad guy here, but if we see that you can put out the money of an alliance by investing money, you know what I mean? Maybe my English is not the best for explaining it, what I want to say it, but what is
are you trying to say that like an alliance is committing into Rorquals and now they're just out? Like it's the individual thing of like I trained into this thing and now it's been nerfed, but on an alliance level, and that can be very destructive to an alliance on alliance level.
Yeah, for example.
Go ahead.
I mean, the thing is maybe. Well, it's hard to explain if, and for me, it's really a hard problem too. But if you maybe have a new Vortex mechanism into the game, let's call it Vortex 2.0 or whatever, and you maybe one person try to knock down a whole cluster or whatever, where are the goals where you achieve what is the biggest impact you could have in that case scenario. And this is maybe a different approach you are getting into it if you are taking maybe this point of view, and maybe somebody at CCP has listened. But who I am to judge?
I mean, one of the big things with that argument, which I think makes it not hold a lot of water, is the fact that almost anybody who invested into a Rorqual has made their money back tenfold at this point. The alliances that set up to use Rorquals heavily at this point have printed a whole lot of money doing so. And so, yeah, you can be like, man, I gotta reship my Rorqual. But it's not like you're out ISK. You made money with that Rorq. You gotta change to something else, which is annoying, sure, whatever. But those Rorquals didn't lose you money. Unless you were somebody who invested into a Rorq in the past, 3 weeks, when everybody knew that Rorquals were the first thing on the chopping block when mining changes were happening, and mining changes were happening.
But this is back to the fact that at least I have said many times, I don't like these binary changes where they completely flip everything in the ecosystem. I think it's a fundamental mistake because as an organization, sure, the return of investment and paying it off and it's written off, that's fine. But you still have an organization that is running on a certain type of ecosystem and everything is depending on predictability. This is back to the chaos. If you make these changes, if you make these extreme changes this fast, you can see the crash, right? It basically goes from one state to that population being completely removed from the game, right? All that value generated is no longer coming in. That means that not only have you made a bottleneck, you've basically almost turned off the faucet entirely. How can you adapt to that? You can say harden the fuck up and all that, but the game grinds to a halt until that adaptation has then happened. And I'm just really annoyed that CCP seems to keep doing this with things that are ecosystem based. I'm okay with them doing it with the meta and things that are sensitive to fighting, because that's basically just the doctrine guys and fitting directors that are going to sit there and have extra work. That's something that the ecosystem can tolerate. But when you're doing it on the ecosystem level, you're making shocks to the system. And not only are people going to be angry, they are going to potentially leave.
Yeah, Caleb, that's the exact point. The point that you are going to leave is, what are you expecting from a game? You're expecting from a game that it has to do some fun and to do all the stuff, and you gave all the positive thinkings into that one point, ISK. And this is not the point of game. You like to play the game because the game is fun. You like to play the game because you know all the guys out there. It's a game of being together and hang around together and do shits together. You know what I want to say. But what I want, give me 1 minute. But if you're going to make it and fix that point to that point, hey, I need more numbers on my ISK wallet to make me feel better in the game, is a thinking approach or a thinking loop, which I'm, to be honest, this is not my game style.
I can give you a real life equivalent, right? If tomorrow, because most people will maybe agree with that, we should get rid of some subsidies, especially to something like carbon-based stuff, right? If we got rid of all those subsidies completely tomorrow, the entire economy would collapse. You cannot do these things on a binary way where it's either or. It has to be gradual. This is like DJs going from one record to the other. If you just slam the slider, it sounds like shit, and the repercussions are going to be horrible. You have to do this gradually, and I cannot emphasize this enough. CCP, you need to stop with these massive binary changes. If you have a goal, put that out in a dev block and then say, we're going to do this over X amount of steps, where we turn it down over X months, right? Because this
over
is
3
not
years.
healthy.
Over 3 years, we saw that graph.
Sorry for short disruption. What is about, if you need data, you need the maximum and the minimum. And between that, you have a slider where you can say, okay, if this going to that point, you have to adjust these numbers on the right side. If you're going to that point on the right side because you're getting to minimum, you need the metrics for that. A 4-quadrant matrix where you have the stuff in there that you can see, okay, if this game is evolving in that kind of state, then you have to turn that numbers on. And this is what CCP, in my opinion, is going to do right now. And I don't understand why the people so upset. I play EVE because I like EVE. I don't play EVE because I need the much money ISK maker on my I win button, and who's the CCP CSM guy said I need the bacon cheese button for that. Sorry for that. Sorry if I say so.
I think that
there's some valid points in there.
I think that we're vastly overstating what is occurring here, because as far as I'm concerned, basically what we have is that the Rorqual and Orca were out competing mining barges and exhumers in their own field, and that needed to be fixed. This wasn't a complete overturn of the entire system. The Rorqual and the Orca are no longer the best mining ship. It's not that critical. There's now a reason to be in those other ships as well. It'd be the equivalent of like if T3 cruisers like completely overwhelmed the fact that all other Logi ships are just completely useless because of, or even worse, like a new battle, like the Nestor becomes the best Logi ship, and therefore there's no reason to turn into a Guardian, no reason to go into any of the other things. That's a battleship doing a Logi ship's job, right? You would need to bring it down so that Logi ships can Logi ships can excel where Logi in their own field. Mining barges and exhumers were not excelling in their own field. That is a problem, hands down.
You still can't defend the fact that from a production and design level, when CCP turns knobs, they seem to not understand that they have to turn less at the time and at smaller increments, because that is the way that you get data. Because in this graph, right, it's really difficult to figure out, is it Rorqual changes that sorted all these things out and got them to this point? Is it the massive nerf of raw materials in space? Is it the war? Is it blackout? It's like every time we have these types of changes, we end up with the same problem. If CCP does not give us prior information on dev blocks of where they're going so we can actually create a buffer by our adaptation, we end up with this discussion where it's always horrible after the fact. It's like being smacked in the face.
If
I think if I was
any
CCP, I
slower
would.
than they already are, I'm going to be in the grave before anything interesting happens. Like,
It's taken 2 years to pull this off.
Like, how long do you want it to take?
Sorry for saying so. I'm a software developer, and if you have that big spaghetti code like that in CCP has, I wouldn't imagine how much millions lines of code they have, and you are just
This
one
wasn't
bit.
actually. This was more database stuff than code stuff. This was not really. There was code involved, obviously, but this was mainly a design challenge, not an actual engineering challenge.
Things like how good the Rorqual are database change, unless they add a new feature to the Rorqual, which in this case they did.
Right, nerfing the Rorqual would be a database change. Introduction of waste would be a programming change.
Caleb, if I was CCP, I would tell. I imagine they would tell you the opposite. If most of these issues are ecosystemic, there are a lot of factors in place, and you make one change and you don't know how it affects because nothing happens, no change happens in a vacuum. But then they would tell, in this case, we should do bigger changes because then we can tell easier the consequence of the consequence in the data we are seeing is due to this bigger change. So they would probably tell you the opposite of what you believe.
As I like to always say, like, this is not a real life economy. This is a game, right? So if you're a government running a real life economy, your job is to keep everything as stable as possible. With this, they not only wanted to create a new balance, but they actually wanted to spur specific behavior in order to change the conditions of things. And therefore, disruption and also lack of knowledge of what was coming up was part of the point.
Yeah, that kind of dovetails into my take on this entire ecosystem project, which I've said here before. It's that because it's not real, because it's a game, people are going to continue to engage when, if this was real life, they would just walk away instantly because they need to live. But people will put up with a lot worse stuff. So acting like we can spend 2 years tweaking this ecosystem that's going to grind on regardless. The killers are going to kill, and the miners are going to mine, and the builders are going to build, and people are going to sell and buy, and people are going to keep coming back. The problem was never the ecosystem itself. The problem was everything surrounding it. And I feel like acting like, all these changes and whatever, it was going to have a positive effect, ended up with nothing except pissing off a whole bunch of people by changing stuff that didn't need necessarily be changed because they were focusing on the wrong metrics. They failed to moneyball this.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Okay. Just one.
No. Hold on. No.
Just
This is a cool
completely
feature
different
I have.
other topic.
Hold on a second.
Walking in station.
Some people. I'm just going to mute you because you keep talking over me. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I hope you can, because that would be rude if you couldn't. What? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Matterall, but you're a robot.
Yeah, you're robot-y and therefore slow.
I want to hear from Billy if he's able to speak on some stuff. He got cut off earlier.
Hello. I don't know. Like, reference the current problems. They had problems. They had a massive waterfall that they needed to shut off. They shut it off, and they've been spending the last 2 years trying to fix the problem. So when they let the dam go, it doesn't result in another waterfall and results in a steady stream as best they can, right? So it's a tricky situation, and one where they knew there was going to be some pains to get the result they wanted, and they were willing to accept the short-term pain for the long-term gain, and that's really all there is to it.
Question for Willie, if that's okay. Do you believe that if they somehow made Rorquals impossible to multi-box, would they have achieved the same thing as, particularly the same reduction in or numbers coming into the game?
If you could not have multi-box Rorquals the way you could, then Rorquals would not have been the problem they were.
But would they have achieved? So did they need everything else with the scarcity rather than just nerfing Rorqual multi-boxing?
Well, yes. How? What?
That's my theory. I think if they nerfed Rorquals to the degree that you cannot use more than 2 of them, then you would have the same effect in terms of how much they reduce the amount of ore that's being introduced to the game.
I think that's debatable. Certainly, Rorqual's exacerbated the problem, but I don't know if that hypothesis is correct or not. I also don't know if it's possible to effectively make it so that you can't multi-box more than X number of Rorquals.
The game design challenge, but it's possible. I think it's just the after
I hear
seeing
that
the
many
plot-
times though, right? And like we talked about this many times on the CSM, right? Like you can say it's a game design challenge, but that doesn't mean that's not the idea to make it happen, right? And it's not only the idea to make it happen; it's also actually taking that idea and then turning it into actual code.
Yeah, but if they spend they spent 2 years to this scarcity thing, if they had this allocated maybe 20% of that dev time, I think that the development challenge can be solved. The reason I'm pushing and I'm asking this is mostly because after seeing the graph today, I became more sure that the problem was Rorqual multiboxing.
Right, but
Rorquals were always the core of the problem.
If you're comparing solutions, you have to prove that the other solution is practical, though. Like, just making people not multi-box it is definitely a harder solution than making Rorquals no longer. The Rorqual, even if you had made that change, it would still have the problem of the fact that the Rorqual is out competing the other mining ships in their own field, right? So it doesn't really fix the problem, and like the idea of how CCP would try to prevent it from being multi-boxable, like that terrifies me.
Well, I think the problem wasn't the fact that Rorquals were out-competing other mining ships. Like, carriers outcompete Ishtars on anomalies, right? The problem wasn't so much as relative value between ships. The problem was, you would rather a Rorqual in space rather than a procurer because they become very good targets. The problem was more like just how much ore they were introducing into the game, and then that ore turned into Titans and Supers and proliferation and that kind of ecosystemic stuff. And then that was solved. And you can just switch this question to, okay, let's not make them multi-boxable, but they nerfed Rorquals. At least the rock composition changes, I think, made them obsolete in the beginning, but I don't know why people aren't using them today. But the idea is, if they are as useless as today, suppose they just removed their ability to mine, right? And then they would have still achieved the same thing they achieved today in terms of reduction of ore being spammed into the game without going through 2 years of scarcity and that kind of stuff.
Scarcity didn't happen because of the Rorqual. Scarcity happened because the stockpiles were already too high, right? You can't just fix the income. You also have to deal with the problem that has been built up.
Yeah, already. If regarding to that, I just expecting a Triglavian invasion into Jeddah, and they got shot into structures, and everyone's poo, and everyone is freaking around and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" Yes, sorry if I say so, but what if this is happening? Maybe then the peoples are going to wake up and say, "Oh my God, what's going on in this game?" Maybe this is the kind of story they need to get more peoples into. Because I don't know. I just saying, hey, what's going on?
So I feel like we're getting
Are we expected
really
to
far
trust
into the
them that the stockpiles are burned down? Because we haven't seen what metrics they were aiming at in terms of scarcity. Like, we're going to reduce this item to that and that to this and that to the other, but none of that has been shared.
Billy, did you start a war? Billy, did you start a war to reduce stockpiles? I think you did.
Yeah, and regarding to the walking in station situation. So
damn, you got me.
I think you did.
Yeah, sorry. The walking in station situation. You need to design first to have set up before you implement it. Okay, maybe they don't have it, but you don't need to have this as a 3D engine where you can walk around like in every one single shut up fuck up game, yeah, where you have your own 3D engine, because this is like Star Citizen. It won't get finished. You want to maybe make some shiny whatever animation with some characters talking to each other at station where you walk around like in what is this called, the game Monkey World Island, when you have a background and you have a 3D object moving around in that place. This is walking station enough, for my opinion. And this is why don't they implement that like that? That would be so awesome.
All right. We only have a few minutes left. Going back to some of the stuff.
I don't know why they don't think about something like that.
Where's the mute? Hold on. I think he can't hear me because he's lagged out. All right.
So
go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have gotten pretty far off the track towards like the theoretical and hypothetical. So I think that I want to talk about a different piece of it, which is the what they talked about when it comes to updating battleships versus faction ships. I found that very, very interesting, that they agreed that faction ships need to come down in price and that they're watching whether or not that's going to work. But battleships are going to be fixed by increasing their power. And in particular, faction ships. I find that very interesting. Thoughts?
I didn't hear them say anything about price. I heard them say a lot more about utility. The fact that they need to be more worth the actual ISK.
CCP
I
Swift
think
explicitly
they like
said
the price where it is, and they want to make them better.
CCP Swift explicitly said that faction ships were too expensive and were eventually going to work their way down. But battleships were going to be buffed to be worth the price that they're at.
So there's kind of three main components to it. One is some of the ideas, right, that Stitch has in terms of like small scale ship balance. And that's where the price of T1 battleships and the relative lack of ability sometimes comes into play. And it's probably most likely that CCP will end up impacting that. Because if they do any direct buffs to battleships, those will have a significant impact at a small or solo scale, where you're mostly relying on that ship's individual stats. The problems when it comes to using battleships in larger fleets honestly have very little to do with the battleships themselves. Yes, there's some cost factors, but the reasons you very rarely see people out in a battleship fleet with subcap logi or using a battleship fleet to attack a structure, those have very little to do with the battleships themselves and have more to do with other mechanics in the game that are causing problems for that fleet. And I don't think CCP really has their eyes on those. And so if those don't get changed, yeah, if you give battleships 20% more EHP, it won't change whether people use them in those contexts. The last is
this was actually brought up on Reddit.
Well, that's true, but not true, right? So it's important to understand that small changes can have massive effects, right? Something as simple as increasing all of the battleships' base speed by 20 or 30 meters per second and decreasing their mass by 10 or 20% could have massive effects on their mobility, right? Like there are incredible opportunities for large amounts of change with very small adjustments.
Well, so the issue actually that was brought up in the Reddit post was that there's two things kind of in play. One is the guided bomb launcher, but more importantly, I think the more salient point is the fact that ultimately it doesn't matter how much you buff the battleships if the linchpin weakness of your fleet is your logi ships, right? Like you can make the battleships better, but if they're just popping your guardians, then what do you do?
If you look at the groups that are actually using battleships right now, they almost exclusively use them with fax.
Hey,
RC Typhoons are going to have a fax with them. Volta Nightmares are going to have a fax with them. And that's just the way you have to do it. Because as soon as somebody has 80 munions, they can start clearing your Logi ships, no issue. And once they kill your Logi, it doesn't matter how tanky your battleship is, it's still going to die.
Okay, welcome, Abu.
Hey, how's it going? I think you're correct in that they won't be adopted in those null-sec scale fights. But they mentioned that they were choosing battleships because they know that it fills like a niche where hacks don't, and they don't want to be changing up like those larger fleet-based ship lines, right? But I think in small gang and solo, I think these changes might push battleships to be way more viable than they currently are, and it gives them a lot of data to see what they can do with other hulls. So I think you should see it from, like you said, small gang and the solo perspective.
One thing I paid a special attention was how CCP Rattati talked about his the Navy ships being his pet project. And interestingly, since the way to obtain them, mostly the Navy battleships, is mostly faction warfare LP, they didn't increase in price at the same rate as Tech 1 battleships. So even just from a cost versus value perspective, I think they're in a better place because they didn't increase that much. The only increase in their price was the increase in their Tech 1 components, right? So I was kind of off-put by among everything he could pick about battleships, CCP Rattati chose Navy ships to be the place which the group which needed love, basically.
He didn't necessarily say it like that. He said it was his pet project, not that it was.
So this is not a new concept.
It's pretty understandable. Like the vast majority of Navy battleships are in the dumpster. Like
they are considered like the worst
Navy
class
and
of ships.
Geddon Navy are literally unusable. They are so bad. And
but they're barely
used.
Right now in the current meta, they're just
fleet issue.
They're just barely more expensive than a Tech 1. They're just barely more expensive than a Tech 1 ship.
No, they're not. They're almost double.
No, they're not. A T1 battleship's 350. Like TFI will run you 700.
All right, maybe I'm wrong in this, but I remember.
Faction battleships are almost universally basically double the price of their T1 counterparts.
So just to be clear here, what we really see is that pirate faction ships have seen a major spike, whereas Empire faction ships have not spiked as much relative to pirates because they have the release valve of faction warfare LP. That said, even that requires the original ship, so you still have to build the battleship. So it wouldn't be
it's based on the battleship, right? It's not about the BPC that's making the price so differential.
Correct. They don't. That's what I'm saying. You can either get the blueprint or you can turn in a Dominix and a chip and some LP and you get a Dominix Navy issue. That's the reason why faction ships are cheaper.
That's what I've been saying. Like, say in the old meta, a battleship was 100 million. I'm just using placeholder numbers. A battleship was 100 million and a Navy battleship was 200 million, so twice the price. Right now, a battleship is 300 million and the Navy battleship is 400 million. So
no, it's 700.
No, now a normal battleship is like 300, and a Navy at the low end is like 600, and a pirate at the normal end is like 1.3.
Okay, that's not my data, but
just open JITA.
I'll just double check.
I don't know what to tell you.
And this will, I mean, like CCP Rattati's assessment is probably right. It will continue to correct itself. It's the fact that they introduced new exploration loot that is required to build these things, and there is nothing seeded. So, I mean, it's just as fast as they're finding it.
Ashtarothi is correct, right? So pirate battleship prices are getting close to the point where you can cash out LP and it's worth it. Some of them are there, some of them are not. But if you use Fac War LP, it is very close to the current build price. So if you want a ton of TFIs, your best choice is to find somebody who grinds Fac War LP and just have them cash out for you.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was talking about, is that because Fac War is two different ways of buying these ships. For all of their faction ships, they can either buy the BPC or they can buy the completed ship as long as they turn in the base ship. Like I can get a Comet if I give them a Tristan, I think it's a Tristan. It might be an Atron. Either way, it doesn't matter. Incursus, that's what it is. An Incursus, a chip, a Nexus chip, and some LP, and it gives me a Comet. So I can circumvent the entire extra doodad that's required to build faction ships.
Well, the point of what was on the stream was that CCP does not necessarily want to reduce the price, or at least Rattati doesn't, but he wants to increase the utility, right? So they are still reflected as being the rare option and not suddenly suffers the same problem as the Macarial, which was like the standard option.
He explicitly said that he wanted the faction and pirate ships to come down in price and expected them to, and that the battleships, the T1 battleships, they were going to increase in power to compensate for their newly increased price. But he said that faction is high right now and should be coming down as it has been.
Yeah, even the people who have money aren't willing to use nightmare fleets right now.
Right.
It's pretty rough.
I
But
want to ask.
I do agree that like Navy battleships need some love in general, except for maybe the Tempest fleet issue. Outside of that one, they're almost entirely unused. You'll see Scorp navies or Navpox on rare occasions, but other than that, the rest of them really struggle.
Aren't
And
we
the
just
idea
risking
maybe-
going back into the power problem where if they become too cheap, all of the faction stuff, they will become overrepresented in the doctrine meta? Really?
I mean,
You
is
know
it
Yes
what?
and no.
Fuck
It's
it,
important to
it's not
understand that
even-
battleships have so many more innate weaknesses because of their signature radius, so they're more vulnerable to being bombed, more vulnerable to being waterboarded, more vulnerable to being damaged by citadels. Their rep efficiency is so much lower. Battleships have a ton of different ways in which you can attack them. They're so much more vulnerable to capitals, for example. So even if the meta does shift to battleships, it's a much there's a lot more opportunity for the meta to naturally fix itself without CCP intervention.
Also,
Here's another
fact.
Hang on, guys. Hang on. I want to distribute.
Take a really long
hold on.
time to go 50 jumps.
Hold on. You can hear me, right? I know I'm lagging, but I want to distribute time a little bit better. So if I can get some more from Abu and Teddy on these topics, that would be great.
I mean,
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, because you create doctrines for your corp, which is in Wormholes. If they rework battleships, right, make T1 battleships viable, and maybe rework the bonuses, give them HP spreads that better reflect the current meta, would you start integrating them into your doctrines because mass is such a consideration? Would you ever consider replacing a mainline DPS or support or E-war ship with a battleship if they manage to give these battleships significant buffs?
I think like mainline DPS probably no, because that would just destroy our whole mass. But support and E-war, yeah, definitely. If they were actually like useful.
Matterall.
But I mean, to me, like the thought of a meta shift as a bad thing, I don't see how a meta shift at the moment could be a bad thing. We've been in this nullsec meta for how many years now?
So
where the meta is basically solved. You turn up in X amounts of hacks or keys, and you fight, and then you go home.
So I
go ahead, Ash.
The and then you go home
Shoot.
part
I just
is
brain
pretty.
farted. Oh,
You good?
So firstly, the thing is that I wouldn't even think about this as like being better than capitals. That's not really the point, in my opinion. The problem that we have, one of the problems that we had before all of this nonsense started, was that the gap between subcapital ships and capital ships was just too high, too broad. That was too big of a jump, right? And it started out with capital nerfs, and it has progressed since. But I think that what they're kind of signaling is, especially with the introduction of new complexity in battleships, they really emphasized in the show how these are tied together. So in the same way that now battleships have a little bit of the same complexity as capitals, but only like a small version of it, so too is the battleship going to be used to better bridge that gap between subcapital and capital ships. They built the Leshak to threaten capitals, and it didn't really work. And I think that finally proved the fact that if you want to finally balance this meta, you need to have battleships be able to threaten capitals as well.
I think
I don't necessarily think that's the case.
This is back to what Dunk is saying, right? This is really about utility per ISK, and in a poverty era where then it becomes enforcing on hacks, right? You have to bring these things into a point. I don't know what the sweet spot is, but if you're just stretching them away from each other and increasing cost for something that could potentially be a counter, but then the utility per ISK is still too horrible, people will still stick to the existing cheaper meta, right? So how do you bring these things along and making something like the hacked meta even cheaper ISK per utility per ISK doesn't really help, right? So where do you have to have these bottlenecks? Having them at the upper end might actually be the complete opposite of what is needed.
I mean, at the end of the day, if I can take a heavy battleship fleet and fight significantly outnumbered against hacks in a way that is meaningful, right? That provides a lot of window for meta diversity, and it provides a lot of window for fights that doesn't currently exist. And the problem is that right now, unless I'm set up with just the right battleships and facts on a citadel, that isn't the case.
I mean, I don't think cost is the only factor here as well, because some groups use like 700 to 1 bill legions, and they wouldn't trade that in for a T1 battleship, even if it provided like 1,000 DPS, because it's not worth the trade-offs that comes with being a battleship. So I don't think the ISK is the only balancing factor here.
So the replacement speed,
what people
right?
what people are missing is generally what's considered kind of the baseline, which is that there is a usual. I don't want to know how do you put this. There is kind of an average of if I spend 300 million ISK, I get a line fleet ship. And when you spend 700 million or a billion or 1.5 billion for different things that give you power, these things are considered force multipliers. But those things are multiplying off of the base. So a lot of the conversation is what should the baseline be? And after that, you kind of work towards what do I have to spend to receive force multiplication power, right? So if I spend a billion ISK and the average person is spending 500 million, then what percentage more strength do I get per person? And that's kind of the fleet equation and how that is worked. It's a bit complex, but it basically enables people to spend to achieve higher results. Whereas the generalized large-scale alliances that usually focus more on blob and heavy numerical tactics receive this kind of baseline number where they're focused on raw ISK efficiency for their pilots, I guess you could say. If that makes sense.
Here's the thing. Well, what I'm suggesting is that there's a lot of headroom above the current power level of battleships before you start flipping the meta on the head, right? Like it'll still be better to bring a fleet of dreads than a fleet of battleships. It's never been about that. It was always, but the point is that like, so think about what else they said. They said flat out that they saw dreads as being the predator of supers and titans, and they even suggested that there might be changes coming to the dreads to even make them more capable of doing that. So if dreads become the threat to supers and titans, and battleships don't threaten dreads, do you see the problem?
The food chain is broken.
Battleships
not only do
dreads,
battleships not necessarily threaten
right?
dreads.
Like if you drop a fleet of Hod dreads on a fleet of battleships, that Hod dread fleet gets deleted by the supers or titans. If you drop a capture gun dread fleet and you don't manage to catch anything, it gets deleted by the battleships, right? Like
you are describing as it is presently.
Spot,
yes.
And I don't think that comparison or that attempt to balance through that lens really makes sense.
I think that you're seeing it as it is now and not how they're trying to make it.
Of course, you shouldn't like directly do only food chain and ISK utility, but you have to have this on the board when you're discussing changes. Because of course you can sit there and do changes that are mechanically and tinker-wise very sane, but as soon as you have to put it into EVE Online, whether you have tinkered in the direction of small or solo or mid-range size or fleet size, one of the others are going to suffer if you have only been myopic in that area. So they need to have this grand ideology thing present at all times when they make these changes. And I think it's interesting that Ash is pointing out that there is a little bit of a food chain problem in general. And I think that's true in most of EVE. I personally think it's because they've been turning these knobs and adding modifications and buffs to these ships for 10 plus years. And right now, they're all a horrible numerical mess.
I'll disagree with that sentiment, because the reality is you want to always be making balance changes. As soon as you say, oh, we've done it perfectly, the game will settle into a meta which will be solved invariably, usually in EVE, within a couple of months. And at that point,
you have to stir the pot.
Yeah, like, this is a game, right? People want variety, so that means you have to continually stir the pot, adjust the numbers, play with them, etc. One of the main things people are complaining about on this stream and others is the Munin meta, right? Like, and that's not because, you know, the Munin meta isn't a good meta. It's actually one of the best EVE fleet metas we've ever had. You know, many people disagree, but it doesn't change the fact it is, right? But it gets stale. People want different things. People want to try, you know, new experiences, fly different ships. So, you know, saying that they shouldn't be making balance changes is...
That's not what I said. I said when they make balance changes, they should stick to an ideology and not make changes that are so out of the bounds that it
I don't even know what that means. Like,
destroys it.
stick to an ideology, like, for balance changes. The ideology is make good balance changes. Like,
I think it means have a greater vision rather than just changing one thing at a time drastically.
Well, I think that they do. They just iterated on the vision as well.
You have to remember, like, you're correct in Omeki, you're correct in that regard. It's just that CCP, the people running CCP, making the decisions on what the vision is, have changed multiple times in the last decade, right? So, and every time the people change, generally the vision changes, unfortunately. And I know they're working on stabilizing a bit of that, but it is what it was, right?
There's also an really important thing that I noted a couple weeks ago, which is that a lot of the changes that we're seeing right now are the culmination of the things that we saw at EVE Vegas 2019, right? Like, we saw previews of Aura and some other things and hints about how the market or whatever they were looking at and stuff, things that didn't pay out until now. So if you assume that there's like a 2-year development cycle, and you know, a few years ago there was a pretty significant, more than normal changeover in control, ideology, and methodology. And so what we're seeing increasingly is the transition over to that new methodology. So yeah, there is a new philosophy in town a little bit when it comes to how these things work. And one by one, the pieces are being switched over to it.
And I can tell, like, from 2 years ago, I don't think that vision changed. The grand vision, one of the important elements of it is, whatever there is on grid, there should be an answer, right? There shouldn't be a escalation chain that's A goes from A to... First of all, there shouldn't be an escalation chain that goes from A to Z. And then there shouldn't be an escalation chain that has no answers when there is Z on field, right? So it should be an escalation chain when ideally it goes A, B, C, D, E, and then Z, and then even that has an answer, perhaps cyclical. So, and I think they're good steps. They made good steps toward that goal, and maybe the bigger issue is ecosystem rather than ship balance right now. It's
rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock.
What I meant is the bigger issue is capitals are too expensive for their use probably right now. So that's
Right.
another issue.
I mean,
And then the question becomes, what do you solve that with? Increasing utility or reducing cost?
Yeah, true.
I would prefer increasing utility and their ability to actually destroy stuff in space, because that would actually get destruction numbers up and be healthy for the game. But it seems like everyone is asking for a reduction in price instead.
If they reduce the cost, they would have to walk back all the things most of the things they did previously. So I would probably say they would want to give them more utility rather than cost.
Yeah, I mean, you could up their power level compared to supers pretty comfortably too. I mean everything could actually just be rebalanced to its current price, and it would just be a different balance. It would just be perfectly functional. It's just our definition of value is just based on our current understanding and memory.
Well, and again, if we lift utility, then it becomes basically lifting all of the game, right? And I think that's the solution, and that's the way forward instead of cost stuff. Because if you want to address the problem with stockpiles and faucets and all that we really need more incentive to go out and lose more. And that means that the whole utility and ISK efficiency and all that stuff is what needs to be boosted, not necessarily reducing and flattening cost. At least.
Well, look at supers. They got clone reanimation.
That's only a part of it.
I have to remind people that it exists, but like it technically was utility added to the super.
It's a very powerful mechanic, actually. It's just nobody's ever really fully exploited it.
Yeah, I know.
The big challenge here is kind of the big challenge here though they reduced the utility because they didn't want capitals to be the ultimate answer to every situation on grid. And now how can you increase the utility without getting back to that kind of meta?
But then you're back to the big fish, little fish, right? What do you need to destroy something that has this much utility? How much value or how many people do you have to put on field?
Depends on how much you buff battleships. But I want to point out something, which is that when most other competitive video games refer to the meta, they don't mean what is best. What they mean is the interlocking chain of hunters and prey where everything has a counter. So as one thing becomes popular, the counter of that thing comes behind it and becomes popular, and it kind of mishes and mashes and goes in a cycle. That is a functional meta. We've never had that because it was like designed by accident halfway.
Almost no game ever has that, right? That's why balance changes exist. That's why tier lists
exist. But we're not even going for that.
Of course they're going for that, right? That's always what
most of the time with Eve, everybody's like just talking about the meta of like, like this idea that everything is designed to just escalate up to Titans, and that's like the way it's supposed to be.
All right, that's just not how Subnautica works. Like, unless you're at the largest scale in like very specific situations, Titans are not a concern.
No, I'm not saying everything ends in Titans, but what I'm saying is that the meta is basically a chain up to the Titan, and then the Titan is just Titans.
Eve is unique.
That's not a meta.
Insofar as Eve is the only game where like you're going to realistically be looking at an escalation chain as something you even need to consider.
Right, but what if that's what makes the game
that final
escalation chain
unbalanceable?
No, what I'm saying is that what if that final escalation chain also had a predator if the person had the right counter? That there's something that actually could be used if Titans are deployed that aren't Titans, that the Titan pilots have to be kind of wary of.
That's exactly
just as
what
everybody has to be wary of the Titan.
I think CCP wants to achieve that.
Yeah, there are lots of things like that. Like, Titans are useless against anything that they can't Doomsday. Like, there's plenty of counterplay there. It gets awkward at higher levels because there's thousands of people on grid. But at the end of the day, right, like, Volta can't just throw 10 Titans at me and call it a day, right?
It is functional, but is it better?
I don't think there's a situation in this where this dream thing that you've thought up happens. Like, I don't think it's a world in which it ever occurs.
I mean, it was a world. For example, if Volta doesn't drop Titans, sure, but say Volta runs in a region that and then the locals have they are sure they have local umbrella superiority, so there is no other Titan super group in the region that can threaten them. Then Volta runs in a region with Lokis, with whatever doctrine they have, and they're going to get Titan supers, and then game over, right? So that was the case, at least earlier in the abundance meta. So it's not the case that Titans are like they weren't being used at large scale. They were being used in the regions where people are sure that nothing else, no other Titan fleet can threaten them. Volta doesn't drop 10 Titans on you because they don't know whether they're going to be dropped by 20 Titans. But many other groups do, like Goons and Horde and Test and that kind of groups.
Right, in very specific areas which are easily avoidable.
No,
Okay,
those
hold on.
areas
You
were.
can't balance, you
They are
can't
the beacons
balance
of content.
Eve like it's League of Legends. You can't
Most-
just look at the S tier and say the S tier is too good, the S tier needs counters, and roll on from there, because that's just not how EVE Online functions.
I don't know if anything, if there are different balance avenues, but if there is a avenue that CCP should care the most, I think it's a large fleet meta.
So to be clear, I'm not saying like a dramatic change. It's just a minor priority change or different understand, like a slightly different way of looking at it. I'm not. This doesn't have to be a dramatic, whatever. It's just the thing is that if you think about it that way, so if you take what they just said, and dreads and dread bombs now are threatening to supers and titans, like as a design choice. I'm not saying how it actually plays out because whatever, but I mean like the designers have that in mind. And then battleships can possibly threaten
You're just making this up. You're just making this up off
this
of
is literally what they just said.
Yeah, you're look.
It's what they said.
You seem to think that CCP has this 5-dimensional plan that we just can't comprehend. And I'm telling you, that's not the case. So the thing in today's presentation, the most shocking thing to me is it further reinforced the fact that Shortage was a complete failure. They released no KPIs. They were directly asked, how do you measure the effectiveness of what you have achieved? And he would not answer that because they cannot, because they have no KPIs for what they're trying to achieve.
That is precisely what I've been saying.
The Rorqual graph basically said the Rorqual era ended 18 months ago. So if it ended 18 months ago and wasn't a problem anymore, that their own graphs show publicly now, why did they feel the need to do what they did last week?
That's a deliberate misreading of that graph.
None of it makes sense.
I mean, they said that their KPI was stockpile size and that they weren't going to show that because of...
They don't have a plan. They spent a year where they did Shortage and people kept building capitals, even though they were warned this would not stop capital building. So that was a year of failure to stop capital building. Then they overreacted so hard that now no one is building capitals for half a year. It's a complete failure of understanding.
All right, but Dunk, take your data and look at it a little closer before you just throw that around, right? Because people stopped using Rorquals because there was nothing to mine. But then you just run into the problem of CCP can't reintroduce things to mine until the Rorqual is nerfed. Because if you don't nerf the Rorqual first, they add stuff back and you just get the first part of that graph again.
No, seriously, we talked about this before all this happened. The Rorqual was actually fundamentally never the problem. It never was. The cup size is never the problem. It's the fountain. And this is why Dunk is fundamentally right in his conclusion. Changing the Rorq, if you have already changed the actual underlying ecosystem, is not necessary. This is very similar to what they did with the market stuff, where there was two solutions. It was an either or, and they did both. And then they did the Texas shooter and just drew the fucking circle around the target. This is wrong. You have to...
Do you remember the exact place where people completely... Do you remember the exact place where people completely stopped using Rorquals? Because I remember I was stealing excavators, then I wasn't. It was the point where they changed composition of composition of rocks, because Rorquals were just one-shotting with excavators now. So they actually changed not the Rorquals, the change. They did an ecosystem change, and that caused Rorquals to completely stop mining. So the issue here. You can say it's the rocks. You can say it's the Rorquals. We can say it's the combination, and that's fine. And Dunk says they have no KPIs. I think that's a bit unfair. At the very least, we can see a reduction in the gap between ore being mined and destroyed. And if proliferation and thousands of titans and that kind of stuff was important, and I think they do. Think that it's important, then they at least reduced that. And then I agree that people actually stopped mining too much even before blackout, but I think that that's because those mass multi-boxes of Rorquals that I'm talking about as the main problem. The reason they stopped because they got everything they wanted. They stopped because they have all their Titans and Supers and everything. And my theory is that's the reason they stopped. That's the reason you got a reduction. And it was mostly in Delve. And that was under my direct observation with the AFK campers and everything.
But
so
there can be many reasons.
That's the exact kind of inevitable end CCP needs to stop. CCP, if your gameplay expires too fast, then you're a bad customer to CCP. If they let Rorquals go abundant for 3 more years, then everyone else, Fraternity, every other Alliance, Horde, everyone else would have their Titans and Supers, and then they would have logged off anyway. And then mining would have reduced, but that wouldn't mean anything because everyone has everything, and then they log off anyway.
It doesn't change the fact that what Dunk was trying to say with the fact that the problem had already been solved. You don't have to go into the details of asking why did Rorqual stock up, because it was fairly obvious when they have nothing to mine, they are not that overpowered utility. It's just not there anymore. So they had solved the problem, at least partially. They did it with poverty, which was horrible and still is, but it was kind of solved. Then you should have the discussion of what do we then want the Rorqual to do instead.
Do you think what was the fundamental change they did to Rorquals to bring the scarcity? What was the fundamental change? The fundamental change was ecosystemic. It was ore composition and that kind of stuff. It wasn't.
It doesn't matter why. Okay. It doesn't matter why. What they changed a year and a half ago stopped the problem according to their own graph. It doesn't matter.
So wait.
There's an explanation.
I have a question for Doc, right? So
I do not appreciate people misrepresenting it.
Right? You're not happy with that, but that is what caused people to stop using Rorquals, was there wasn't anything to mine. The issue is, right, if you want them to fix the economy and make it to a point where people are mining and happy to do so, they had to take the Rorqual out of that equation first before they could do that. So how would you propose they fix the economy without changing the Rorqual in a way that doesn't just prevent us from going back to farms and fields?
It's important to remember.
Has been fixed? What has been fixed after 2 years?
Okay, so I will address that. One sec, guys. Okay, just please understand. EVE Online's economy at the time was a flooded house. What they did was they first turned off the water, which was the Rorquals and the mineral influx. And then they spent the last year and a half bailing the house out. It is now wet, but empty. And they are starting fresh and new. Does that analogy help clarify what has happened?
Sort of. The question is, was it needed to balance it this hard, like this many changes to the Rorqual, at least for the sake of the Rorqual players? I do believe that Rorquals needed to be changed in their role, but that's my personal beef. But Dunk is right.
So
it doesn't
I'll answer your question.
That the Rorqual problem is solved.
So you say, did they need to make this many changes to the Rorqual? And the question is answered best when you evaluate it by this. Did the Rorqual need to stay the same? Right? And the answer is obviously no, it didn't need to stay the same. CCP had a vision for what the Rorqual is and should be, and they then acted upon that vision to make it happen. People don't like that vision because it's different from the vision they knew, but that doesn't change the fact that it's different, and the changes they made are intentional.
I'm just
completely agree, and I would just like to know: does the Rorqual now have enough new stuff that balances out what was taken from it? That's all I'm asking.
Well, you're operating under the assumption that it must balance out, and that is absolutely not something that is necessarily accurate, right?
Not necessarily one-to-one, but if you take something away, you should at least give a consolation thing or something. But
that's not true at all. There's many times where the Munin has been nerfed from 7.5% per level damage to 5%. Nothing was given back, right? When things are too strong, and they are then nerfed, there is usually not a returning utility from the side that's coming in. They are just nerfed. You can then make the argument that the Rorqual wasn't that overpowered, but the reality is the Rorqual's overpoweredness is not necessarily measured just in its mining output, but in its survivability, its mobility, so many other factors that make the Rorqual what it was and, allowed us to see the Rorqual era.
I'm more asking if it's now the proper fleet command ship that it was always supposed to be. Is it that
is
role
it perfect
that
now? I don't think we will know for a couple months at least. But if it's not what CCP envisions it to be, then don't be surprised when they make further changes to adjust it so that it is. Obviously, it's going to play a role in their what is it, compression or whatever the thing that got left out of the patch there.
Compression.
Yeah, it's compression mechanics. So there's still work to go in terms of how this thing is going to land within its new ecosystem. So it seems naive to think there's going to be no more changes to the Rorqual.
So
I just want to one last, like a small thing to Dunk. He keeps saying this. They have no metrics. They have no accomplishment. Maybe like nothing was worth this much player loss, or I don't know. I can be on board with that. But at the very least, we can give them that they reduced the gap between ore being mined and ore being destroyed, and that was important, I think. So at the very least, they accomplished something with scarcity, not nothing.
So, okay. I'm so tired of everybody saying that there was no KPI. They said that their primary KPI was stockpile levels, but that they weren't going to show that information right now because they weren't comfortable with it. It's still OPSEC, whatever. But this is something that they can show. And thus they segued into the graph with the Rorquals. I believe that's how it played out. But I do know that they mentioned that stockpile levels was their primary key indicator, and that they weren't going to show it for obvious reasons. So suggesting that they didn't show it because it was bad is nonsense.
I don't know if their graph
secondly,
was on them, so that there was no real reason they couldn't show their graph.
I can absolutely tell you that they feel uncomfortable showing some of these graphs to even the CSM, so I am absolutely certain they would feel uncomfortable showing some of these graphs to the player base at large. Just because you cannot think of a way to exploit something, I can assure you that does not mean there is not ways to exploit it.
But isn't that a problem? If it's not even something that they want to engage a discussion with the CSM, then it's
I didn't say they weren't willing to.
No,
I didn't say they weren't
it's because it violates the game.
No, he didn't say they didn't want to engage with the CSM. He just said that they were uncomfortable because of OPSEC.
Let Villian, please.
I was just saying, I didn't say they wouldn't show us, I didn't say they wouldn't engage with it. I just said they wouldn't show us the exact metrics. They would talk about the metrics. They would, talk in generalities. They say this is good, this is bad, whatever, but they wouldn't show us the exact data, right? So
do you feel, Villy, that it would have been possible for them to have made a more significant effort to produce visible targets and progress using sanitized data that kept players informed throughout the process?
I think if you endeavor to try and keep players informed, the players will use that information for their own nefarious purposes.
Well, there's got to be some level of communication.
No, the desire for players to be informed is a very player-centric desire, right? Like, that's one of those things that like you want it because not having that information makes you very anxious. But ultimately, if the design of the game, if the experiences that they want the player base to be going through is a particular way, then they're going to do it that way. And if us not knowing about it is part of the point, then why would they undermine that? But more importantly, they've always maintained that every violation of OPSEC, even the monthly economic report, is considered controversial because of the fact that it gives out information that shouldn't necessarily be out there from a tactical point of view.
But tactical aside, from an actual discussion about game design point of view, we need numbers to discuss things. And of course, yes, you can say, well, some will try to game it. And Willie just said that you can game even stuff that they might not think can be gamed. But they need to have this discussion, at least with the CSM. Of course, they can obscure the data a little bit, but they need to have actual facts on the table, because otherwise, when they say, well, we want to do A, B, and C.
Easy.
Yeah, but I feel like the trust level is lacking from CCP. I feel like they are so afraid to share information, and especially with the player base at large. I
can understand
the CSM has historically earned that concern.
But you can say the opposite as well, right? It's very relevant and important for CCP to get feedback from the player base because it is this big brain with wisdom of the masses, right? It's like if we do not have these things, it's really, really difficult for us to give them good and factual feedback. This is why the whole thing of well, some people will then speculate and make a lot of money. Yeah, but that's not that much of a problem. It's actually a feature, and having that discussion before it happens and all the benefits massively outweigh the downsides.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. If the puzzle, if the game is which alliance can better adjust to a chaotic environment. If we are living out in space in an uncontrolled universe where nullsec was designed to be harsh, which alliance can handle the changes best, which can adopt the best, which deserve to survive? That doesn't work if you give them heads up.
It literally does, and it has historically. And the fact that you are saying that it doesn't means that you just want to go back to chaos RNG whack-a-mole.
No, what I'm saying is that the more you give people preparation time,
you need to be able to adapt to a new change in a game. If you are running a 5,000-man group, that's just a fact.
Correct, if
you're demanding that they always adapt after the fact and without any fucking warning, it's just chaos and horrible and volatility galore, and it's not fun to fucking play.
Well,
it's not all the time.
You gotta understand, stockpiles are really important information. Alliances will gauge each other with respect to that information. For example, they will. And one thing I learned being on CSM is how much you can profit from the information being shared in there without necessarily breaking the NDA, right? So even the information shared at CSM under the NDA, you don't necessarily have to break the NDA. You know what's coming, when is it's coming, when the devlog is being published, and you can position yourself and do all the thinking and then just position yourself exactly at the time where the devlog publishes, and then make a lot of money. Even that is too much, like very, very big power. I don't think it's a coincidence that most alliances send top in industry guy to the CSM. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Gun sent Arith and Hanfam sends Kenneth and so on and so forth. So even that is too big, like a very big power, I kind of understand why they are kind of. And then this kind of information, the stockpile information, it actually interferes with PvP. It doesn't create it doesn't only have potential to create value for people, specific people. It also have the potential to sway the chances of one alliance to the other versus the other, and that's maybe probably the thing that they also want to avoid. So I get that why they are a bit hesitant about sharing data.
All right, are we at a natural stopping point? Because it's been about 90 minutes. Check.
I don't have anything to say.
Did anybody hear that robot? I thought it was funny.
I'll go back to my Marauder farming. 2 billion an hour.
All right, I'm going to try to restart, and this may actually kill the stream, but hang on for just a second. Okay, we're restarting. We'll take a look at, I might as well turn on my camera so you can see the horrified expression on my face of Discord misbehaving. And we'll come back with the guys and see if we still have the stage channel to go. But in the meantime, you guys should definitely think about supporting Talking in Stations through Patreon/Matterall. That's me. And also make sure that you look out for the series coming from Katya Say in the new year, I believe. So Patreons, I think, will actually get a first look at that, and then it will be released to public. So it's a little perk for you. Okay, let's see if we can get back to that. Good discussion. It's definitely, Discord is definitely choking here as it starts back up.
Hi.
Hello. There. Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. Almost got you back.
I dared run Final Fantasy while talking to you guys, so my computer overheated.
Oh, okay. How's this?
I assume we're off the air now?
No, we're not. We're not. Not off the air.
Oh, I was like,
Back on air.
I came back and I was like, it got quiet. Did you all just like stop talking? Just
No, it
'cause
was
I
dead
wasn't
air,
there?
and I was restarting. Can you guys hear me or my robot?
No,
you're good now.
Oh, I
God,
can
I wish
tolerate
this-
you now. I'll
yeah.
turn your volume back up.
Yeah.
Why didn't you do that earlier?
It sounded like
Because
you had a stroke, man. It was so bad.
We're still on, and we're going to keep going for a little bit if we have anything else. But the reason I didn't do it was because if I did it, I wasn't sure that I could make it back. And so that's what the problem was. Okay, but now that we are here.
Oh, hey, listen, who's coming in clear now?
What is... We had some...
Can I comment? Like, I was...
Not yet,
for a minute, I let people
not
talk.
yet.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt, my bad.
Thank you. We said some predictions before about the Q&A. Was it going to help? What was it going to be like? What do you guys think? Did what you expect happen during the Q&A?
It was less explosive and car crash TV than I expected.
You should ask Fonsuhi about the moderation level.
Chat was a shit show
Well, I mean, you've got a group that's been spun up to, go after. So it's always going to be like that. And until
I knew.
It's not just one group. Like
it primarily is.
There's a lot of people that are really, really disillusioned right now.
Well, I think the point is that there was a major group that was driving general discontent. So yes, not everyone was part of that group, but like there was a lot of negativity coming from there, and that spreads.
I mean, it really depends on.
And there's a group that's still getting like
is.
generalized messages to continue to push that narrative, right? Like, it's
okay.
What? Oh, sorry, I am in the dark here. What group are you talking about? Nullsec?
Nullsecers, yeah.
Yes, there's a nullsec group, all right.
But it's a valid rage, right? Because if you go back to what we were talking about, well, let me just finish this. What we were talking about yesterday about if they had communicated the way they did in the dev block way earlier, and if they had actually explained what Willy was just explaining like 10 minutes ago, right? With what is the reasoning behind this? Yes, in part, that was in the ecosystem dev block to some extent, if you read between the lines. But if you don't, it was not clear that was the purpose. The whole thing, we have to turn off the faucets, then we redesign the ships, then the Rorqual will have a new role and a completely new and interesting type of gameplay, and then we will start slowly turning the faucets back up. But they didn't give us that explanation. They didn't. If they
every
had,
single one of those events were warned about 6 months ahead of time. Explicitly.
Yeah, they absolutely gave that explanation multiple times. People just didn't want to listen to it. Yeah,
absolutely,
yes, they did.
They said explicitly in July that the faucets were going to be turned back up. They said explicitly in July that there were going to be significant mining balance changes. And it was obvious to a lot of people, especially with other things.
And what did I just say? If you read between the lines, if you understood what was meant, and if you didn't, you basically thought that you were being, screwed over.
Satellite?
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know how much of my group was in the Twitch channel today, but I definitely know, talking with my English Corp in Frat, people are not happy. So it's not just that particular group that we
that is a fair point. Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of group. There's a lot to suggest that it is only an Imperium problem is disingenuous. I would say it is definitely broader. There are a lot of people in a lot of different groups.
There is multiple groups that are unhappy about a variety of different pieces of the changes that think there are problems with the changes.
Right.
There's only one group that has been virulently spun up and aggressively sent after specific devs and specific changes.
Have they been sent?
Would that be a fair thing to say?
The devs part is what annoys me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But hold on. But but Teddy, you're from Wormhole Space, right? You're not from nullsec.
Yes.
Are wormholers not liking this stuff? Because I thought mining and wormholes just went or will go up with compression.
Yeah, I mean the gas things are quite nice. It was kind of sucked that it took them a week to put them in. Just because they forgot to put them in.
But it's kind of cool that they're in, even though they're a week late.
It is cool that they're in now. The proposal to remove all minerals from R4s would have pretty hardcore impacted the people that actually mine moons in Wormhole space, because that's one of our sort of only sources of minerals, apart from getting the random belts that spawn.
All right. And I heard Poshvin is like a really good place to mine these days because it has, now they have crystals, so they're actually mining like twice as fast as they were. And they have, was it Arcanor, which is, or was it the other one? Not Arcanor,
no.
it was.
Arcanor.
No, they have their special stuff.
Sounds like somebody's trolling you, Metro.
No, not Arcanor.
On...
It's the other one, Mercoxit.
Mercoxit only exists in the home systems.
Yes, but it does.
So, good luck getting there.
What? No. But, okay.
Does it?
People that live there can go there. That's the whole point.
Okay, well, they get Mercoxit plus their mining.
The people I see mining, which is nobody, I don't think there's much mining going on.
I've heard there is.
Well,
it's like
they tell me that they're mining, so.
Yeah, they're mining pretty
well. Who is they?
The people that live there.
I'm in the biggest group that lives there, so I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Well, I asked about mining speeds from, oh my gosh, I forgot her name. I have to look. Jackal. And also the guy that was in here before, Cosmos. He mines in Poshvin. It's good mining to be done. I don't know if they're mining like crazy yet, but there is good mining to be done in Poshvin. It's just dangerous, but it's possible, especially ninja mining, if you mine all the expensive stuff. And
right, it's not being done at scale, but it's definitely being done.
5 people who sit there and ninja mine the Mercoxit and home systems because those systems are quieter. But like in the main triangle, you can't sit there with a barge for more than 10 minutes before somebody's going to kill you. And because you have no local and really no tools to prevent them from getting on you, you're going to die unless they're incompetent.
Okay, and also I heard that wormholes, if compression kicks in, would be a pretty good place to mine as well.
I mean, it's always a decent-ish place to mine, but you obviously have the complete randomness of getting belts to spawn, with the good belts only spawning in high-class space, and that our moons are all R4s, and not very good ones at that.
So I've got a question for you, Teddy, on this topic, and it's being asked in chat. So. Or referred to in chat. So the point was that the minerals that come out of the R4 is basically slag. Like, yeah, it's the only minerals you get, but it's like the most useless part of the minerals of the whole thing. But if they replace that with the exact PI that you need to do the reactions for the stuff, wouldn't that be in general more useful to you?
Those reactions are kind of worthless, though. And they take so long to actually do.
But that's the entire point of the R4, and it's also like the entire thing. Like the entire economy is relying on you liking to do this. So,
well, unfortunately, like it just takes too long. You mine a full moon, and it takes like 50, 60 days to fully react everything, unless you're insane on reactions. And it doesn't even give you that much more of a profit than just taking out and selling it.
Also, the compression ratio from going from unreacted moon goo to reacted moon goo makes it infinitely larger. Unless I have missed something that's changed recently.
RCF is actually pretty easy to move relative to its components.
You end up creating more work for yourself for an additional 10% profit.
It's nothing that we need. Like, if it was something that was to build T3s, or anything that, wormholers use in their fleets, then it would be worth doing, because it would cut down how much we have to haul.
Right.
For it to be used to make caps, when most of us don't build caps, most of us will buy caps if we have high class holes and just hold them in.
Right. But my point is that it's very clear to me that CCP is setting up the production of RCFs and the other components involved in that to go to market is like the rest of the game is kind of relying on that being a pretty consistent thing, because the major other place to mine R4s is HiSec, and not only do HiSec not have compression or not reactions, but they also can't compress it there. So it's infinitely more complex from there. The one place that can do this easily is Wormhole space. So by putting the components to let you do the reactions easily, they're basically handing you and asking you really nicely to do it. So I wonder what else it would take, or I wonder if it will be done by some people. I don't know.
There's always going to be corps that will take the risk to do it, that they'll see enough profit in it. But to expect like PvP corps to like do this on the side, or to dedicate like 20-30 man hours to clearing a belt if they don't have rorks or something, it's not feasible. There will be obviously corps that will do this, but they're only going to be able to do it for a month or two before they get evicted for not PvPing or for just being like a loot pinata. If they're just a mining and reaction corp, they're not going to be able to fight back.
All right.
Right, but I think that the idea would be that it would be an income for people that aren't necessarily only doing that, but it's an easy thing that you can do entirely in the hole and then export out to the markets.
Well, it just relies on you sitting there mining when that person could be gas mining instead and be making triple the amount of ISK. Where the reactions for that then massively compress the gas.
Right.
And sell for much more, and build the doctrines that most wormholes use.
I mean, the reality is it looks like CCP just wants to go back to roughly what was occurring prior to the ore nerfs and HiSec, which was if I was a group that didn't mine and I wanted to build caps, I imported ore that was compressed from HiSec and I built it with that, right? And so it's just going to be, instead of what I used to do, which was, get my compressed spodumene or compressed Veldspar or whatever from Jita, I'm going to buy my compressed R4 and I'm going to move it to my citadels and then I'll react it or whatever and I'll make the cap. But that's going to be the end result. Is you're going to buy the compressed R4 in Jita and jump it out.
Where's the compressed R4 coming from?
HiSec.
Where's it being compressed?
In HiSec?
No.
I don't know what to tell you. They're adding compression.
They're not adding moon compression to HiSec.
Moon compression was going to be put on Rorquals.
Right, which is not in HiSec. They explicitly excluded moon compression from HiSec.
And so the only thing worthwhile
you cannot compress moon goo in a citadel in HiSec.
Correct.
That's fucking weird.
Yeah, and the only thing worth compressing was R4 moon goo because it had those extra ores in it, because you needed a lot of it with the newly designed ways to build capitals and battleships. So if they remove that, there's no need to get any kind of moon compression.
That's what I'm saying. If you mine it in HiSec, your two options basically are to take it into a low-sec system and try to react it there, or pull it into a wormhole and try to react it there. You're not going to compress it without taking it one of those two places. You're not going to react it without taking it to one of those two places. They've explicitly made this have to be moved, or they also made it so that it's most efficient in the wormhole because they both have the R4s and the ability to compress, etc.
They're saying in chat. They're saying in chat that they're adding Orca and Porpoise compression in HiSec, and that.
Yes,
that also
is
explicitly said that they can't do the moon goo though.
So so that still holds. They can't do the moon goo.
With the information we have, that's correct. You can't do it. The only module that was on the test server for moons was the ones you fit to the Rorqual.
More importantly, when they even talked about what kind of changes they might make to it, they signaled directly that they were like the one thing that they were really reluctant to change is anything that would add moon compression to HiSec. Like this is a big thing because the idea that you cannot just mine your R4 and react it in HiSec, that you have to figure out some other way to deal with it, is integral to how this is working, it would seem.
All right. We may have an image coming in here from CCP in a second, and it is, I believe, a chart, which might be interesting to see, pertaining to the conversation we had a little bit earlier about specific materials inventory. As soon as I get it, I'll put it up.
And yes, you can just refine it in place, but you're going to get significantly better refinement levels in wormhole space if you rig it.
All right, so I guess Teddy's representation of wormholes is that they're kind of ambiguous, a little bit weary or leery of the change that may happen in the future. Okay, I'm going to show something here. If you could tell me what I'm looking at. This is, oh, okay. It's years and expansions, and I don't know what this represents, but I'll bring it up and then we'll talk about it. All right, that to me looks like
what is this, mining levels?
It looks like you're missing an axis there, buddy.
Yeah,
I mean,
think
it's
that's
mining
on
levels,
purpose, but you can look at the ratio, right? The top of the mountain is higher than the valley. Yeah.
So it starts ticking up at lifeblood. So yeah, that's mining levels.
So
you can very easily see
is this like super secret squirrel channels that no one's supposed to know how you got this? Is that why this is missing so much
CCP
data?
just gave into this, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, CCP gave it to me. And then
I can't remember if I've seen this before or something similar, but
apparently this has not even been shown to CSM.
Whoa, exclusive.
I'd hope not. It's almost unreadable.
So
we might have seen the readable version.
Where's the data?
This is pretty impressive.
Look at the text gibberish on the left.
We can see. The one thing that we can see is it looks like mining is happening at almost 3 times as much now as it was prior to Ascension than Lifeblood. So Ascension was the introduction of alpha clones. Lifeblood was the moon rebalance. That's when we got moon mining. And so,
actually, Matterall, can you ask them what this is? What is this?
I am asking, yeah.
Because this isn't mining amount. It's something else.
Can we get like any context at all?
The context that I have is
player count.
It's one specific materials inventory. So it's a very
CCP psychic chat said Gaurav is correct in that it's a stockpile graph.
It's a stockpile
this
graph.
is the stockpiles. Okay.
Oh shit.
Okay. I assume that little gap in the center of it is some sort of weird error.
That's a glitch.
I can't remember what it would be.
Yeah, it says it is the inventory of one specific material.
Yeah.
So TLDR stockpiles went down.
Right.
Not anywhere to where they were prior.
I know which material this is, but
do you? Okay, tell us.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to look too hard to figure it out, I don't think.
Probably Veldspar. I don't know. Maybe that's too basic. Or Nox, maybe. I don't know.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a T1 mineral either.
Well, now we're all going to be guessing, but this is indicative of the pattern of stockpiling that has happened. And I think that's what we're supposed to take it as. And if you look at the stability all the way up to 2017, that's incredible stability. And then a terrible distortion.
So what happens in Ascension?
So it's kind of tricky. You can blame it all on Citadels.
Yeah. Well, the expansion, not... not the feature.
Citadel was before
Oh,
Ascension.
column
Like
A.
Citadel is 2016.
Right. Well, I mean, there is a clear uptick after Ascension. So if it is like amount of things, then
it's one thing.
Yeah, like if they're trying to reduce stockpiles to, before things got crazy, it looks like things got crazy around 2017, but we've only been reduced to 2019-ish.
Yeah.
As I said, the house was flooded, turned off the sink, bail yourself out.
And this is one of the things I was going to say is that like people were saying that like people were describing what has happened as if it was all crazy. But the way I see it, like what we saw was exactly what you would see if it was working. The first thing that happens is that the source gets cut off. Then stockpiles start getting burned through. You're still building capitals because capitals haven't been made harder to build. You're going through stockpiles because you still need to build your capitals. As the stockpiles grow lower, then it becomes harder and harder to continue to build things. And then when they're ready, when they feel that things are getting closer to, because they had already identified in July that they were going to bring things back by the end of the year. So they were getting to be pretty comfortable with where things were. So it's time to start prep work. So you bring in the industry changes, which cuts off the ability to build them now because we don't want you to build them necessarily as easily as before. And we want you, and you're done burning through the stockpile by building them and smashing them into each other now. So, and then you, right before you introduce the minerals, you also cut off the Rorqual. You were great. Thank you for getting us here. Thank you for getting us through this scarcity time. But I'm sorry, man, you don't get to come into the future. Like every single step of this way makes total sense to me.
Well, at the very least, we can see there was a real problem.
Look at CCP Paragon in chat.
I was gonna let you notice that.
That's awesome.
This is all being done at the cost of a lot of other things in the game being allowed to fester.
I think that
looking at all of this, to then only go back to 2019 levels, like it calls into question, like, was it worth?
Well, let me put it like this: do you think they could have done scarcity harder? Like, let's be honest here. You're like, it wasn't enough. Yeah. It's like, what did you want to do? Like, we dump you off in the middle of the fucking Gobi Desert? Like,
did you want it to be worse or last longer? Which one of those would you want?
I'm saying neither. I'm saying was this worth it?
I mean,
the question of was it worth it is always going to be answered in many, many years that we have not seen yet. Right? This was long-term planning with short-term pain. Right? Like, yes, you're at the end of the short-term pain, and you're like, was it worth it? It's like, well, we won't know for another 5 years.
I figured it out.
What is it?
Oh God, we flattened the curve.
Oh my God.
Oh.
No,
all right. You know what's?
Look at what I had done. I'm just saying.
What's interesting to me, I hope CCP doesn't get mad at me, but I'm going to go there. When was CCP bought by Pearl Abyss? Was it November 2018?
Yeah, it was 18.
It was later than that.
Oh, it was later than
No,
that.
because they had already bought it by the time Vegas 2019, right?
That or I'm getting old.
So it was probably, was it November 2019?
No. Maybe it was 2019.
Oh, no, it was 2018.
I thought it was 18, yeah.
It was September 2018.
So my question is, like, were they fattening Eve up for a sale? Is that why they were letting things go? Because this was a perfect storm of multiple different things that they did not put the brakes on until after they sold. Maybe
I've heard that conspiracy theory 1,000 times, but the reality is I don't think CCP would have known how to fatten Eve up if they
I know how they did it.
Yeah,
they had sale after sale after sale on Plex. You saw it all summer.
Okay, yeah, that part, yeah, absolutely. But like the in-game effects and the in-game economy management, like I don't think they could.
No, but I mean, at that point, you want to keep players happy, so you're not taking anything away. Are you letting it ride?
So in Eve Vegas 2016.
By the way,
when they announced
that theory is like brand new. I just made it up.
Oh yeah, first time. So Eve Vegas 2016 announcements of citadels. I distinctly remember in one of the panels, the CCP dev said, you will have new things to buy and to spend your money on. So we're going to have to give you more ways of getting ISK. Like there is a distinct like feeling and drive that they were going to give us more ISK source things to do and more ways to make ISK. I think that things like maybe the Drifter invasion collapsing and that entire path of wherever that was going to go kind of falling apart might have hurt some of that plans, given the fact that it was from the lore panel where they were talking about the Drifters when this statement was made. But my point is, so the next, I remember having a conversation with CCP Rise where he was lamenting in 2000, I want to say 18, where he was lamenting the fact that, well, it was right after Invasions came out, whenever that, or sorry, Abyss. So when the Abyss came out, he was, talking to me about the rewards in it and all that stuff, and he was lamenting the fact that they literally couldn't add any new faucets into the game. They couldn't add any new ways of generating actual wealth because they were already capped out. They had to carve things out in order to put new things in. That was the state that they were already in. So you see this path. It wasn't a conspiracy. They were just handling the problem. They needed to put in a lot of carrots in order to make Citadels work. We chewed the shit out of those carrots until 2019, and then we went on a diet.
Well, so people who were born into that era, if you join 2018 to 2020, right, your world has been, there is a path to great wealth in the game that hasn't been seen before. I mean, look at 2017 and before. That was flat. Like, this is a different level of stockpiling that we've ever seen. Then you're calibrated to think of wealth as, I don't know, something that you're almost entitled to. And so
right, and there's a lot of things like that. Like, so the Rorqual, the expectation is the Rorqual as the top miner instead of being the industrial command ship. The fact that the Titan is the end all be all rather than bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. The fact that the Titan is considered to be an individually attainable object. Like, these are all consequences of Citadels. And yet now, when we're trying to like fix some of these problems, there are people that are like, whoa, this is the way it is. And yeah, that is a very real problem.
Yeah, but
here's the best
personal.
One second, let me finish this theory, this conspiracy theory, so I don't leave it halfway done. The opposite side of that is that when Pearl Abyss did buy CCP's EVE Online property, that more work went into it to keep it alive longer. And that's when you see metrics being gathered, probably through 2019, and then plans being made, and then action being taken to really rein in the ecology. And yes, it was going to be painful, and they've been trying to literally hold your hands through the pain, saying it's not going to be forever, and it's for the good of the game. And they're on the right path to keep the game in a better state, but it is kind of slow. That slope down is a lot slower than the slope up. There you go.
I mean, well, to use your carrot analogy, it's a lot easier to put on weight than it is to get it off, right? Like,
that's a growing curve. Up until it gets cut off, that's like it's going up only more. It looks like,
and that's pretty current. I mean, this is like, that looks like about a year integer there after 2021. So I would say this is up to date. And there, you got a lot more weight to lose, Eve.
Yeah, but Eve has developed a much healthier lifestyle now. They exercise, they go on their Peloton bike, they're doing all the things that they need to do.
I think that the point is that if we stabilize where we are now and don't keep climbing, I think we're safe. I think that we were still safe. The problem is that graph, if you took it logically forward without any of this happening, I think that it gets very spooky very fast. So rather than pulling us out of completely unhealthy, this is more stopping the plunge into unhealthy and bringing us to a more, we may have been too low before, and then we were way too high, and now we're, somewhere in the middle. We're Goldilocksing it.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Keep people enjoying the game as they put everything back in order. It just seems to be what's happening, and it's painful for some people. I know, but you can't eat everything you want and still be healthy. That's just kind of the way it looks on this graph. Get in shape, Eve.
And the God honest truth is that games in their design are not every piece of every game's or of a game's design is designed to make you feel good. In fact, most game design is designed to be a problem for you, to be a challenge for you, because it's the overcoming of these things that is where the gameplay is. So, when we're evaluating these things, it's not like every change is supposed to make us happy. It wasn't like they thought that waste was going to thrill us. They did think that compression was going to, which kind of alarms me. But either way, but rather, there's medicine that has to happen according to, a broader view of things, right? It's forest for trees. We have a player's perspective. They have a game designer's perspective. They want us to experience specific things.
I think players can help. And Billy, I think you're going to need to get everybody together to have another big war. Get together with the Imperium and say, "Come on, guys, let's do this again."
Yeah, I know you'd like that for
do you have
content, but you can do the next one.
No, media wars don't kill stockpiles. We need ships, big ones.
Well, get on it then. Stop being lazy.
Give me a PvP meta where I can actually fight people. Nullsec.
Be the content you want to see.
Yeah, maybe we can help Murray punch up, and he can take care of some of this.
Peloton's just over there. Get on your bike. Let's go.
I'll kill all the Feroxes. Just put them in Feroxes for me.
Thanks very much for this chart, though. It really puts things in perspective. I think the problem, when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that problem was a little bigger than I thought it was. And
if Sykes still listening in the audience, he should show another one, I think, just for a little more perspective on it.
Hopefully,
just give him one more. Doesn't need to be labeled.
Yeah.
Because it can help. I'm like 90% sure I know which one this is. So, and I know what some of the other ones are, and it just would help highlight the differences, perhaps.
All right, he's going to try to get us one.
Yay!
So
yeah, all right.
I want to.
Matterall's like scoop. Yeah.
It's like I'm leaving that thing up. You notice that's going to be in the clip art or whatever the thumbnail. CCP Swift says, I thought the few hundred Rorquals outmining the rest of the game was a good one. That one was
that was it made the point to me for sure. But again, that the problem was that argument of, well, it was solved in at the very beginning. Why did it keep going? Well, because turning off the faucet doesn't drain the sink.
You wanted to say
if your basement is flooding, the first thing you do is you shut off the water, right? Like that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Because if you don't turn off the water, then you're never going to make any progress.
There's the graph.
One of the things I find really interesting is, what is that? Oh, that's a coveter. Okay. Because it looks like the coveter got the biggest. No, procurer. Right? What's that light blue? Yeah.
The light blue is the Hulk. The lightest blue.
Well, no, not the lightest blue. If you look,
Coveter is the one that got the biggest jump at the end. Coveter.
Yeah, it not only it was already broad and it got broader. It took most of the gain that just happened.
Yeah.
But it's one of the most ISK efficient ships to mine with, so that's not a.
No, wait, no, I think it's. Hang on, no, Matt, I'll zoom out again. I'm sorry. There was no, because look how many blues there are.
I know.
Well designed graph.
It looks like fire, though. I kind of like that.
Oh, yeah, we need the legend.
The legend's back. You can see now.
The blues are a similar category of ship for the most part. No, they added the porpoise in there. That's unfortunate. They were so close.
Right?
I'm honestly really excited to see the new meta, evolve for mining with barges. I think it's going to be.
Yeah, it looks like. Oh,
is it Hulk?
New chart's coming.
That's what I first thought it was.
No, the Hulk is the lightest colored one, so it's that tiny thin line.
I'm sorry, so you guys, your visual's catching up, but we're looking at a new chart now, and it looks similar.
Very similar to the other one. Which is good.
Data point. Just so you know, in JEV assets, you can just right click the data point and like delete it from your database if it didn't pull it correctly. You can just.
All right, so here's another, I imagine another stockpile. It's one item, one mineral or something. It's not a mineral. It could be something else, but.
What we don't know is that CCP Psych is drawing this in Microsoft Paint.
Clearly. Again, look at the incredible stability of previous to 2000. Well, this actually took off a little bit later. This is previous 2018. This other one was previous 2017, and then it started going up. This one started going up. Yeah, actually a little in 2017, but really took off after 2018.
The thing that gets me is that last spike right before the down.
That's the beginning of the war.
The end of 20?
Yeah, end of 20, beginning of 21. Both charts have this noticeable spike right before it goes
the
down.
beginning of the war. That looks like right about the middle of the year.
Wasn't the war the beginning of 2020?
This one happened earlier. This happened in like May.
Isn't it still March 2020 right now?
21.
What?
Yes, yes.
What?
I think both those are indicative of a lot of stockpiling for war. I think this one appears a little later.
Yeah. So that second one is way later than the first one.
The first one is in March through May-ish area. This one happens after the summer, probably.
So I'm going to bet, I'm just going to guess that the one that we just got is some sort of ship, whereas the first one is something like Noxium. Because what we're seeing is a big spike as everyone reprocesses right before the reprocessing change.
Well, there was a good question in chat. Symbiotes asked if this includes stale assets or not.
They are both materials. We know that, Syke said.
It's the changes on ore DNA? Yeah. Wait, is it because everybody reprocessed right then, or because they're both materials?
Yeah, they're both materials.
Oh.
We don't know. I mean, there's lots of materials in the game, right? There's minerals and there's moon minerals. Yeah. There's also planetary materials, and there's lots of different types of materials.
The goal is just to identify how clearly the chart goes up on literally everything as you emerge into the Rorqual era, and how even as things got leaner, a lot of those stockpiles didn't necessarily diminish until we finally hit an age where they could, I guess you could say.
Okay, so I think I get what you're saying.
You need a catalyst for burning it.
All right, a couple things from CCP Psych and chat. You've seen this, but in case you're not, you're hearing this. This says it's the changes on ore DNA. Anybody translate that?
Yeah. So when they reduced what was going to come out of a ton of different ores, people
the reprocessing
took their stockpiles and reprocessed the entire thing so that they'd have the minerals.
Mm-hmm.
Let him explain. Ash, I didn't hear what he said, but explain it one more time.
So these are presumably charts of some reprocessed material from ore, where the ore got reprocessed en masse when they changed what was coming out of the reprocessing, right? So they reduced the amount of, tritanium or whatever that you got out of Veldspar. So everybody that had Veldspar roughly where they were going to use it, location-wise, reprocessed all of it right before that change. And so you get the spike.
So that's if they held it, they would have lost.
Hang on, I just want to make sure. So when CCP Psych says it's the changes on ore DNA, what he's saying is, please let me finish. Just let me finish this to get the crowd up and running. What we're talking about is not the chart. We're talking about the spike. So that's what that spike is represented by, the change in ore DNA, which relates to refining. Okay. Second, these charts, both of them that follow roughly the same pattern, are materials. Not minerals necessarily, but materials. Okay, so we're clear on that. Go ahead now.
I was just, that's exactly what I said already. Like sorry. Like that's what I said. All I was trying to say is that's what I meant when I said everybody reprocessed for the mining changes or for the before the reprocessing changes. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
Aldron is saying, hey, what's the y-axis? It's not the first time I've seen what's the y-axis. They're not going to tell us what this is, and they're not going to show us the y-axis. That would be too much information for EVE players that would...
Yeah, they did us a favor by showing us this, you know, without it going through heavy sanitization or whatever.
And what we're meant to see here, and the reason this has been given to you guys through this place, is to show you the distortion, that's my word for it, but the incredible augmentation of 2018 through 2021, basically, of at least 2 materials. And it's astounding. It's triple what was there before, and what was there before was stable for years.
I thought it was because we asked nice and didn't curse at him.
That's probably part of it, right? Did we lose Billy?
No, I'm here. What's up?
Oh, yeah. So did you have a guess, and can you vocalize that guess, or are you going to...
Well, I don't think it's good that I would vocalize it, you know, because I have other information, and I've had some of these discussions about this stuff with them before, so...
All right, we have a third graph coming in. God, today's a great day. Thank you, Psych.
Yeah, you just so you know, it's like you're Matt Rawls' like favorite new CCP employee.
I just hope that like we don't see in like a couple weeks on CCP Psych's Twitter. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, but this is my last week at CCP now.
Oh, stop it.
No.
Stop it. All right, so this is a third graph that we're looking at now. Again, following roughly the same pattern. This one, I think one of the things that we can say is a little bit different is that the downward pressures look a little bit different, or the downward slope. Here's our first one. It seems to be a nice slow decline.
Relatively speaking, it's only gone up by 50% instead of 3 times.
Yes, this one's also a slow decline, but all going down significantly. And this one seems to have gone down faster and has now started to slow down after 2000, basically after January. So I don't know what that one is, but there.
Well, you can extrapolate, right? So it's going to be something that was harder to stockpile and burns quicker, right? So.
Veldspar, because there's no inventory.
I can't
issues.
imagine why they didn't want to give us graphs. Even these were like trying to divine exactly which one it is, you know?
Exactly, right? And then, you know, if somebody figures it out, it's like, oh, the tritanium supply is this, or the isogen supply is that. It's like, you know, it's like...
It's not going to be obvious, I suppose.
This is what I meant by, like, even if we as consumers of a product would like to know, like, have confidence that that everything's healthy, the problem is that us as players, like our game actually becomes disrupted the more information that they give us.
Good point. Yeah, again, we're looking at the pattern, and the pattern is that corrective measures are working. Stockpiles are dwindling. I don't know what CCP's goals were when they started these kinds of measures, but things are headed in the right direction if we want to get back to a stasis.
Well, I mean, they've said their goals were to reduce stockpiles at multiple points, right?
What I meant is the measure of the stockpiles. Did they want to come down 1/3, or did they want to come down 2/3, or did they want to come back down to 2016 levels before the giant?
Well, I think at multiple points they've said they've wanted to reach healthy levels, right?
Exactly. What's a healthy weight in your analogy? What's a healthy weight? What are we looking for? That's interesting. I think they may have said, you know, we got the stockpiles back to where we want them. I don't know if they did, because they're not back to even 50% of where they, you know, of what they gained. But they're definitely headed in the right direction. And now it's been like 1.5 to 2 years of headed in the right direction.
At some point, they need to look at the balancing act of enjoyment versus getting that cleaned up, right? Because the longer they wait in terms of driving that stockpile down, the quicker they're going to be able to start getting meaningful data about whether the economy they create afterwards is in a healthy state or not. But
I'll try and like I'll try and like couch that what you're saying there in different ways, because the analogy we used earlier was the fatness or the weight, right? Like, so somebody put on all this weight, they gained 500 pounds, they lose 200 or 300, and it's not all of a sudden about where you're fasting and going on like these hyper diets anymore. Now you're trying to focus on living a healthy lifestyle, losing a tiny little bit at a time, and much more just like living a sustainable life, if that makes sense, versus something where you're focused entirely on the weight loss, if that makes I'm trying to I think this analogy actually works pretty well, to be
Well,
honest.
for that analogy, right, the key concept is that the person losing weight can't do the hyper intensive diet all the time, right?
Correct,
At some
which
point
is
they want to eat some nice food,
which is kind of what I'm saying, though, right?
At some point CCP needed to stop the dieting and basically go to just like what is hopefully a bounceable state, which is easier to recognize the smaller the stockpiles are.
So I think
if
that
you only make slight adjustments down in the economy, right, at peak stockpiling, it can take years and years and years and years and years for you to see where that effect's baseline really is, versus getting rid of more stockpiles earlier. You get to see that baseline of what the changes you've made have actually done much sooner.
So the thing is that this entire concept is predicated on the assumption that what was happening was a bad thing, right? Like we're assuming that the direction it was going leads to a worse Eve than where we are or where we're going. And I think that one of the things that the player base is saying is that they don't necessarily agree with that assumption. Now, that does make the game, like the game had a certain vibe in the early days, and in order to try to maintain that idea of like death is a serious matter and like all that kind of stuff, kind of requires there to be this kind of curve. But if you just let the game continue to become more and more of a playground of titans, that might have been fine in a different way. So it's an interesting question to see whether or not this was even the best thing to do, like on a highest level. But also, the question that I have is will people actually come to it? Is the unhealthy economy the reason why people weren't playing Eve before? Like, Eve has a lot of other problems. We have a reputation. We have, a lot of people maintaining and continuing that reputation outward.
Have you seen the players of New World lately?
Well,
savages.
Yeah, but
we're angels.
But my point is that like there's not just Eve players. I'm saying Eve Online has a reputation.
I think you mean Redditors matter all.
And so it's more than just can we fix the design of the game? It's can we fix the design of can we make the game work in a good way and then somehow convince people that it is that way? Because we can make all these cuts and we could get healthy and we could get, in shape and whatever. And what happens if we still don't get a girlfriend? You know what I mean? Like,
okay, hold on. Let me save you from that.
I'm sorry if this one got personal for you, man.
CCP Psych, CCP Psych, says, I think we are done with the diet.
Right. Well, that's exactly what they said, right? And that is one of the things that I keep hearing, which is that like this doesn't feel like the end of scarcity. Like, first of all, it's the end of the cuts, man. Like it's just the beginning of the coming back. All they said was that they're not going to hurt us anymore. Like, just be thankful for that.
Of living a healthy lifestyle is what it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. These are they've incorporated space vegetables into our diet.
If you try to break the game in one way by doing one specific thing and that gets taken away from you, perhaps you need to look at different things to make money.
Well, you're never going to convince anybody, kind of like shaming them. But what we want to show is that there is a reason that people were upset that came here after 2018, because the idea of how ISK and its relationship to players was distorted or distorting and was distorted for about 2 years from the middle of 2018 to 2020. So it's hard. It's hard to basically say you're like my example is Los Angeles, right? You're living in Los Angeles. It's an oasis and it's beautiful. You got an ocean and, but there's this desert behind you. And it turns out you're actually living in a desert. The oasis was a freak. You're in it was only a few 100-year freak accident. But that's when you came in and settled the place. But it turns out you're a Bedouin. Maybe that's not a great example. I'll have to think of a different one.
I kind of spaced out there and came back and was really confused.
Matter of calling people Bedouins, it's okay.
I was talking about Star Wars, Sand People, or I should say Tusken Raiders. But anyway, point is, you can't, if you came in 2018 and later, you came into kind of a distorted wealth ratio. Well, basically measured by stockpiles. That doesn't mean that you were rich, but the game itself was in a, I don't know.
I started out roughly 6 to 12 months after the start of Farms and Fields. So I am that person, roughly speaking. I think I started playing 2 or 3 months post Lifeblood.
Yeah,
would you consider yourself an average Eve player?
Kind of weird,
your experiences?
Murray.
No, but like the generation of people that joined the New Player Corporation that I started in, I can, kind of follow the general trends of who went in what directions in terms of PvP or PvE game styles, who stayed in blocks, who went to small groups, who quit, when they quit, for what reasons, all that information,
Hey, I'm saying you can have opinions about the game if you came in after 2018. I'm talking to chat here because I'm catching some slack for not letting Sand People or Tusken Raiders have an opinion about the game they love. But let me just tell you, you can have those emotions, and you should have those emotions, and you should even be able to communicate those emotions and stuff. But then on the other side of that, understand what the context is, and that's a thing that you need to look at. What's the context of what I'm angry about? Okay, go on. Ash, were you going to say something?
I was, and then I started typing, and now I forgot what we were talking about because I was answering a different question entirely. But, oh, yeah, I remember now. So the good news is that in the end, well, let me take another step back. If you are a 2018 player, and thank you, and you feel like your understanding and expectation of the game is being violated, then you're not inaccurate for that. There is a certain amount of, this game has a long-standing tradition of HTFU and welcome to the machine, but, you're not wrong for feeling that way. And in the same way, people who come from before 2018, who don't trust CCP for, because of their history, and people that have lived through scarcity and so don't trust CCP through, whatever. That's, that's fine. You're right to not trust them for their history. But you know what? They just called themselves out. They said that that this year, or next year rather, is going to be the year that they add in the stuff and do the cool stuff. So pay attention and hold them to task for that. They told us that the last 2 years was going to hurt. They said that the next year is going to feel good.
I trust them.
You don't have to trust them. Just watch them.
No, I trust them. They said it was going to hurt, and it hurt. I think that's a good track record.
I mean, yes, but so when we look at this graph, we see that, at the very, very tail end, the drop seems to be flattening out. If we're at a good place now, with it flattening out and everything, with things the way they are, then won't giving more good stuff undo that work at this point? How is giving more stuff than what we have a healthy lifestyle going forward?
At this point, it's much more about, how do I put this? To go back to our fat kid analogy, they're checking the scale every day. they're more aware of. I don't know how to say this, man. Like it's much more of a awareness thing. I think would be the best way to say it.
I guess all I'm saying is, how can they give us more stuff without it recreating the problem again?
Oh, they've got more control over it, right? I mean, this was a perfect storm, I think, on large scale ISK acquisition and stockpiling. I think now they have more granular control, and that's what they needed to put in order to tune the ecology better. I assume that's what's different. The changes ushered in a whole new tool set for them to work with. And I think that's what Swift said, right? They can tune for a dreadnought cost without blowing out all the subcap costs. Why? Because they have specific items that go into a dreadnought that don't go into everything else, and that wasn't the case before.
Also, the biggest problem before was that you could upgrade your system and just pump it indefinitely. What they've said is that they're going to do it as dynamic distribution, which means that like it wouldn't be that simple. So yeah, you can actually put back in the faucets if you make them, worth or a challenge that's worthy of the reward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Also, CCP Psych says, and he's answering somebody, I think, says, but we haven't. Make sure I read that right.
I think he's answering me.
He's answering you? Okay. Oh, okay. I'll read it then. Well, pose your question and then read his answer.
Well, yeah, no, it's just what I said a minute ago, which is, how can they give us anything without it recreating the unhealthy situation again? And the answer, which I'm pretty sure that was an answer to me, I could be wrong, is that there are certain processes that are not in play yet, that are going to be put into play, that are going to eat into those stockpiles even further.
Well, he writes, because we haven't kick-started capital/super capital manufacturing yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are going to eat into those, like those stockpiles are going to get used by that.
Oh, I see. Oh, interesting. So some of the materials that we're looking at, you're assuming, could possibly go into
stuff waiting to get chewed.
Yes. So, okay. Well, then we're going to have you're just moving you're moving the stockpile up the chain to, first you have a shortage of lumber, which is what we're looking at. And then you have.
Right. But they may already, they know what the ship stockpiles look like. And maybe the ship stockpiles can take, a little bit of a bump right now.
I keep trying to give Billy credit for starting a war that absorbed 200 Titans at least. And, he gladly donated 100 himself that one time in M2. But he won't take the compliment.
That doesn't sound like the Billy that I know.
Jeez. Wow.
Toxic.
All right, Mandaryl, you're welcome. There you go.
You did a lot for the game. I appreciate that you sacrificed Test.
I appreciate you too, Mandaryl.
You guys can get a room or something.
Let it never be said that Matterall only picks on goons. Holy snap!
Yeah, that was.
Right? Like,
I'm much harsher on. I'm much harsher on friends than I am people I don't talk to.
Oh my god!
But yeah. Anyway, we'll see. Once capital production gets moving, and I think that's pretty clear, right? They said it in the. They said it in the dev blog, and then they said it on the show. And he just said it now. Capital production is coming, or better production values, so that whatever you build is worth selling.
From what I seem to understand was that capital production is increasing, but they explicitly made it so that they can increase capital production without increasing super capital production as much.
All right. I was thinking something. I think I may have to start writing again to really write this out in a way where I don't think it out loud in front of a live audience. But I was thinking of writing an article on who really won that war.
So,
Jesus, Matterall.
If I may,
I think I can make a case.
there was something that stood out to me. The biggest thing, the biggest things that stood out to me in this presentation have not been talked about yet, which is their reference to a universe state machine and their spitballing of the idea of an NPC deciding to build a station. The idea would be that if you make the empires or the factions more dynamic, you can make them invade different space. You can make them expand and contract territory. You can make our efforts relate to that. And while that's like really high and hoity-toity, and I really hate to talk about that tinfoil, it really feels like they're at least suggesting in that direction, right? Where a universe state machine, basically, if you want to think about it this way, the universe itself is playing a giant game of Stellaris, and we're just like player characters within it. And therefore, you could have large events, say the Amar decide to expand into Stain like they're prepared to, and you can have small events, like a specific system is having a riot at the moment because the Caldari state is losing control.
Fascinating. All right. Well, we're about to wrap up. I think we've been at this for 2.5 hours. It's been a lot of fun, and we got some crazy great graphs out of this that really illustrate a problem. I thought the Q&A went really well for CCP in that they explained some stuff. And that dev blog, although some people said it wasn't specific enough, I thought, summarized the situation really well and talked about where they were headed in very clear ways. So I think that's pretty good communication from CCP. You could talk about the psychology of, well, they should have tricked us into feeling like we got something as opposed to losing something. And maybe there's a case to be made there. It's interesting to think about. But as far as a company, a community team, and developers communicating to their players on where they are, where they're going, I think they've done a lot in the last few days. What do you guys think?
I just wanted to second what Ash said. I think what they're hinting towards would make EVE Online even more alive than it already is, and it would have some fascinating gameplay possibilities.
I'm just taking them for what they said. This is, they even reinforce in this chat right here, new sites for small, medium, and large scale gameplay, new content and new tech. We know that they have, they're rolling out more and more of the finite state machine controlled AI, like through Aura and the other elements from the campaign. We know that they're coming out with an expanded new player I guess, path for mining beyond the tutorial in order to make people that come into the game be able to be better integrated, and that they're going to expand that further. I think that there's a lot of potential. And as I said, I think last time during the pre-show, if this was the dark days, I think that we're going to be okay, guys. Like, it's over. We made it.
Well, are you saying it was nothing? You're not the one that suffered.
Tis but a scratch.
I mean, just because I was mining Rakavine while everybody else was. But either way.
All right, Villy, did I'll buy you some poutine. Sorry about the comments earlier. Where are you on this? Feel they communicated well?
Well, the chat poll didn't.
I'm going to assume he stepped away. I wasn't really looking at the chat except because I was on my phone. I assume chat, I think that chat is a distortion as well. I don't think it's representative. Sorry, guys. I know a lot of people watching this right now in chat, but I don't think it's representative. These are the people who actually speak up are motivated in one way or another, either to support or not to support, or they have a question or they want to say hi in some way. But there's a lot of people who are lurking, who are kind of taking things in, making decisions a little bit less passionately or even extemporaneously. And that's going to be your majority, I think. At least that's my sense of the EVE world. There's a lot of people who aren't even paying attention to this stuff, but they will hear from people who are paying attention from this stuff. And so it's important to get correct information, or what you're going to hear is going to be a mischaracterization of the situation without context. And you're going to get people hyped up that aren't even paying attention to the meta. And it's going to be unnecessary volatility that doesn't need to be there. And I'm not looking at this game for it, because this game is tame compared to what I just saw for a brand new game, New World, that came out. And the Savage players just tore it to pieces. They exploited everything they could. And then every time they exploited it, they put it on social media, say, look what I did, guys. And ruined confidence in that company, in that game. The game deserved losing some confidence because it was kind of buggy and it was a mixed whatever. But you just looking at that mirror of what players are like, players can destroy their own hobby. And if they're not destroying their own because they already left, they're destroying it for the next guy. And that's just pretty sad. On the other hand, CCP doesn't get a free pass. They're going to be scrutinized. These are smart players who want a good game that's complicated and challenging. And they're getting that. And a lot of people who have done a really good job, including people in this room, who basically show up, do some number crunching, and turn in some data and say, like, here's our experience. Like Carnero said it on the stream for CCP. This is our lived experience, and all that is valuable. And to CCP's credit, they have a pretty good community team and dev team that is willing to listen to some of the stuff. And where they started with this patch, we have some stuff that's delayed because it just wasn't ready because of criticism, and you have some stuff that went through that was a little more adoptable by the player base. And so all that works together with the company as they make the game, fun, without the players designing the game. Because if the players design the game, it's game over. I think, again, chat is just unrealistic. CCP's chat, our chat, and, wherever people post, even in EVE Online forums, there's some pretty harsh stuff, but I do not feel like that is the temperature of the players that I talk to. And if you go into game, there'll be some people who are upset, but it's a lot quieter in the game. You know how you're in a war zone and it's really noisy because all these rockets are exploding and flak is being shot over your head, and then you fall into the ocean and it's totally tranquil. And that's what it's like to go into.
It's quieter in game is not the argument you think it is.
I'm in game every day.
I'm just kidding.
I'm even in Jita, and it's like, this is a piece of cake,
You're catching a lot of flack from chat right now that you don't trust.
Well, because I'm stirring them up. It's part of the offerings that we do here.
I mean,
all in summation, because we're gonna leave now, but I just wanted to leave them with a little present, get them warm inside. So that's what
80-20 rule is a thing. and I mean, I guess I'll close by a quote that I love to quote, which is by one of the designers of Civilization, which is, given the opportunity, a player will optimize the fun out of their game.
All right, last words for anyone else? Matter troll. That's awesome. It's awful, but it's awesome. Anything else, guys? Okay, well, thanks. You could have been in chat with us. As you can see, we have a new stage channel that we'll be using where you, the audience, can come in and, just like Dunk, we're going to have a part 2 here. Let me give those guys permission to talk. Can come in and actually participate in this. So if you're out in chat and you wanted to participate, this is an area where you can do that. Hey, Dunk.
Hey, how you feeling?
So I'm in and out because of work. But I just, Matterall, you and I don't always see eye to eye on this, but you say you don't think the forums reflect players. You don't think RE reflects players. You don't think Twitch chat reflects players. You don't think community discords reflect players. Why do you think that all of those things are wrong, but this group you listen to is somehow reflecting the majority of EVE? That's what I don't understand, is every corner I go, the majority of people are unhappy with the game's direction as opposed to happy. So is there another place you go that somehow you feel that everything else is incorrect, because that's where you and I have a big disconnect. Is everywhere I go, they think I'm still on CSM and they want me to help fix the game.
Yeah, talking in stations where we have a diversity of gameplay.
So you think that the sole place that we have accurate representation of the players is one Discord?
No, this is, again, this is not one place of one people of one group. This is a diverse place. We have diverse game styles. We have people who are trying things and people who are upset at things. There's a bunch of people in TIS that were upset too. I didn't do a lot of the work of showing people like what this patch looked like. That was done by Kenneth, who spent many hours explaining to people in channel, and you could see the level of animosity towards the changes go down over time. It took weeks, and you could see it on our broadcasts as well. But people started to look at the stuff and say, yeah, okay, this is not so bad, or whatever. It wasn't perfect. Even Kenneth said this is not exactly what he wants, and it's not his authoring, but having a diverse group around you makes a difference. If you're talking to the same type of players all the time, you're going to hear the same thing over and over again.
So you don't think the Evo forums, Reddit, various Discords for other news groups, Discords of different corps and alliances, that those are not a diverse group, and that the diverse group we should listen to is only TIS?
May I?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Go ahead.
I think that, Matterall, maybe you were suggesting not that general communities should not be trusted whatsoever, but that when the group is particularly large and particularly homogenous, perhaps certain nuance gets lost and people will black and white and polarize things and not necessarily treat an issue with the detail it deserves.
I detect an issue that I see all the time, which is that this was not an exclusivity statement. This was an inclusivity statement, right? What Matterall's point was that I took was that do not just listen to all of the naysayers, because there are people who are also enjoying it. They aren't the only voice. I hear this from other people, but that gets turned around to, what, all the other people don't matter? No, they get their voice. I'm just trying to give voice to the other people.
Dunk,
this is a classic situation of poor phrasing.
Hold on.
That's not what Matterall says. He doesn't trust the CSM not to put their personal preferences ahead of the game's preference. He doesn't believe what he reads on the Evo forums. He doesn't believe what he sees on Reddit. And he doesn't believe what he sees in any Discord that's in any way Alliance operated. That's what he said.
That's not what I've said, but if you're saying like through the span of my career,
Sorry.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say though, Dunk, is you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. You're out there testing, as you said, on the test server, and then you're writing a blog. And I have a feeling that blog made a big difference. You did it right. You're part of the solution.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. But my point keeps coming back to this. Eve needs direction, Eve needs a vision, and Eve needs something to inspire players to log in. Now, while some modifications of the game, like the crystals or the skills, are great, they're good, a positive thing, modifying mining skills is not giving people a reason to not log into New World or not log into Albion or not, it's not something that kind of excites people. And what's lacking right now in Eve is excitement, something to look forward to the future. And if you compare to the past in Eve, complete capital, new kinds of capitals, structures being introduced, lifeblood with, active moon mining. These were large scale changes to the game that had their detractors, but people were enthusiastic for it. And what we're lacking is enthusiasm.
Yeah, and to Doug's point,
enthusiasm about mining in a Hulk. And that's the key thing that they seem to be lacking with the current leadership at CCP is you need to feel excited about this thing you spend all these hours doing.
And to Dung's point, right? Like the newest thing that we got in my most recent memory was we got fleet formations. Okay, well, FCs, which are a very small part of the population, they're going to be the only ones really using that. I think what Dung's saying is that, okay, we want more content. Like, give us more content, give us more stuff to do.
CCP didn't come out the gate saying, hey guys, wasn't the last couple of years awesome? No, they didn't say that. Like, they said that you're right, there hasn't been much, but they also said that stuff is what's coming. So like this year, so they already have the plans for that. Why would we, like, they explicitly called that out.
What is coming?
New small gang, small, medium, and large gang, new sites.
That is a completely fake stuff that they've been saying for years.
Sure.
Saying for years
no, they have not said that they didn't say last year that they're coming out with all that this is the year that they're bringing it back. This is exactly what they've been talking about. And the other problem is that what I think is happening right now is that this is the refractory period right before FanFest. They don't want to announce what the sites are yet. That's the announcement for FanFest. Like, right now, you're right. We don't know what's coming, but now we at least know that they do have something coming.
All right, so maybe there's an expectation difference. Do you think people are going to start logging back into EVE who haven't been logging if there are more PvE sites in EVE? Do you feel that's a valid way to inspire large numbers of players?
I do not interpret that as being only PvE.
The point is, those people need to be out in space, Dunks, for those PvPers to go hunt them. So if a PvPer thinks PvE content open and out in space is not good for the game, I think those people are rather dumb.
Easy now.
Well, we have instanced PvE now where you can't go in and hunt people. So is that
to be fair, you can hunt people doing that instance PvE.
From the big picture, does anything they're talking about compare to we're putting keep stars in the game, or we're doing active?
We don't know. We don't know what they're talking about. They haven't told us. That's for FanFest.
For the last 2 years, there's not been
explicitly said that there wasn't going to be.
Let him finish, please. I'm talking to you, Ash. So Dunk, please finish.
This is a video game. It's supposed to be fun and enlightening and enjoyable. And the idea that we've spent 2 years with no measurable, by their own admission, KPIs they can present to people.
They literally just sent us 3 pictures, and they told us what the KPIs are. They've given us 4 graphs already. Stop saying they didn't have KPIs.
Let him finish, please. Go ahead, Dunk.
Well, it's not
Let
true.
him finish. He's got to finish. Go ahead.
Arneros asked him specifically for KPIs. He didn't give a single KPI. The graph
Stockpile level.
Oh my God. I'm going to put you in.
I'll see you later.
Be nice, please.
No. All right. That's not optimal. Okay. But we were wrapping up anyway, so we can have another show. Maybe we'll bring Dunk on later on. I want to say thanks to CCP. I want to say thanks to everybody in this room and the guys that were here earlier. I also want to say thank you to the crowd out there. However you feel about this, I'm glad you were here watching and getting some information from all the guys that were presented here. You could be one of those guys if you come to Talking in Stations Discord and show up to the stage whenever we have one of these events. We'll try to get as many voices as we can in here. So thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We're going to end the 2.5-hour broadcast that was based on CCP's Q&A for their winter summit. So thanks again, guys. Thanks everybody in here. We'll see you next time on Talking in Stations.